And ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the prosecution is not going to get that man today. No, because I'm going to get him.
This is the Hagmann and Hagmann Report for today. It is Monday, April 21st, 2014. I'm Doug Hagmann, co-host, along with my son Joe Hagmann. Together in studio, we are the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. Folks, you're about to hear an incredible program tonight, 3 hours with two very special people, bringing you 3 hours of unbiased and uncensored news and information, their analysis as to what is taking place right now in America. Folks, you're listening to the only show where the news is presented to you in 3D. Well, not the only show. I know the Common Sense Show does present it to you in 3D. But folks, we look well beyond the headlines and bylines and bring you the news behind the news. And we have newsmakers that we deal with all the time, and such are our two special guests tonight. For the new listeners, thanks for checking in with us this weekend. My goodness, from the Philippines to, if you can believe this, Indonesia, not India, as well as some new listeners in Australia and Montreal. God bless you. And all across the United States. Thanks for checking in with us this weekend. If you like to do that, and if you want to have your own special shout out, just send me an email, and of course we could do that as well. We broadcast live, folks, from every weeknight from 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern Time. Our home base on the internet, HomelandSecurityUS.com. HomelandSecurityUS.com. We're also simulcast every weeknight by the Christians United Broadcasting Network. There you can tune us in at the Hagmann and HagmannReport.com. Spell it all out, including the word "and." Thanks for joining us tonight. Thanks for your belief and your trust in us. And thanks for investing your time, deliberately investing your time with our program. We really appreciate that. We'll walk through this minefield of current events together. Now, with that, I just want to welcome Joe to the studio today.
Great to be here. Yeah. And we have both of our guests on with us.
Oh, okay, good.
So we'll start with Dave Hodges. Dave, it's great to have you back on the program.
Well, it's always great to be on with you guys, and it's a pleasure and honor to be on with you guys and Steve Quayle.
I'll tell you what, this is going to be an epic program. And for those listeners not familiar with Dave Hodges, unless you've been living under a rock the last year or so, you know who Dave Hodges is. TheCommonSenseShow.com, and of course Steve Quayle from SteveQuayle.com. Folks, if you go to HomelandSecurityUS.com, both their websites are hard linked to, we have them both hard linked to the websites. That is, let me talk. I can't even talk. Go ahead, Dave. Sorry. Or I'm sorry.
Well, you're right. We're hard linked to your show description, and I appreciate that. I duplicated that on the website, getting a lot of hits. So I suspect you're going to have a fairly sizable audience tonight.
Well, it's always the case with newsmakers like you, Dave. And of course, Steve, welcome tonight to the program. Thanks for taking your time out to do this program tonight.
Well, thank you. It's interesting. As Rome burns and the president reads children's stories on the White House lawn, we've got the basic World War III in full motion. Some of the headlines that Dave and I will both be talking about, confronting both Russia and China, strategic mistake for the U.S. You've got to ask yourself, ladies and gentlemen, why at the height of the greatest period of international tension have the most, I would say this, the most learned, the most skilled, and some of the most decorated military officers, flag officers, and generals been forced into resignation? Why has the U.S. military suffered intense cutbacks in their budget? Meanwhile, the DHS, I'm sure you both saw the story, has bought another 25 million rounds of 12-gauge shotgun ammunition. So here's the thing. We've got to recognize this, and I'm going to make a statement. I'm going to turn it right over to Dave because he's been writing about this, and to my knowledge, there's only two guys talking about the invasion that's already here in place, and the coming totalitarian takeover of the United States, and that's Dave and I. That's not saying we're great. It's not saying anything. All it's saying is this. You'd better understand that it's almost like someone higher up than those puppets in Washington have given the orders just to stand back and let it all fall down. The idea of alienating the Chinese, the idea of alienating the Russians, at the same time we're declaring a new Cold War, at the same time, and I stand by my sources, and Dave will tell you he's had over 100 reports of Russians in this country. I'm talking military. We're talking about a plan that was put into place probably almost 30 years ago, if not longer. Ladies and gentlemen, these aren't the Red Dawn type of speaking Russians. These are the guys who grew up speaking colloquial English and are all strategically placed throughout the country. So we are under attack already from within and without. We have a total devastation of the U.S. military. We've got the assassination of some of America's prize men and women who are fighting, and it's a recipe for what I would call the program destruction and plunder of the United States. Go ahead, Dave.
Well, you're exactly right. And this has been going on, as you said, for a long time. The Soviet defectors back in the 60s and 70s warned us that this was coming, this exact thing. And this president is the perfect puppet at the right time to usher this in. I mean, here we're facing off against Russia over Ukraine and their possible invasion of Eastern Europe, or certainly holding Eastern Europe hostage with their gas shipments that'll go through Ukraine. And what are we doing? Obama's downsizing the military. You already pointed out how he's destroying the leadership of the military, but he's taking them down to pre-World War II levels where we couldn't even fight the Japanese until we built up our military. How the heck are we going to engage Putin and then later China and then handle the domestic mess that's coming with the Chinese and Russian soldiers that are already here? Obama is a traitor who is setting us up for defeat.
Yeah, Steve, this has been, as you pointed out, Steve, and you've been saying this for more than a decade, the internal invasion, if you will. I mean, this is a very methodical process that we're witnessing here, and you were one of the first to point out that we're being invaded. And when I say invaded, as you pointed out, not a Red Dawn invasion, but a seditious, treasonous invasion.
And it's happening on so many fronts. Let's just talk about the Chinese situation involving the Bundy Ranch. What's come out of that is we know that ENN, a Chinese energy company run by the Chinese military, was supposed to take over the Bundy Ranch for $4.5 million, paid to the Clark County Commissioners, which is a huge county that encompasses Las Vegas. And now what we know is these solar energy zones, what I call the newest Agenda 21 designations, are cropping up everywhere. I have them here in Arizona. And here's what they all have in common. This is what's scary. They're located next to a large energy source. Bundy is in proximity to Hoover Dam. Here in Arizona, the solar energy farms backed by Chinese money is in proximity to Palo Verde nuclear power plant. I'm getting reports from my readers that this is going on in Barstow. This is going on in Victorville, California. And this is of major concern because the Chinese are preparing to take over all energy. That's the only conclusion one can reach. In addition, these energy sources, these energy zones, are located in proximity to large military bases. Luke Air Force Base here in Arizona, in the previously mentioned Chinese solar energy zone. The Bundy Ranch backs up against Nellis Air Force Base. This is going on all over the country, and there's one more variable that we need to consider, that every one of these solar energy zones that I've uncovered, and right now I'm up to 5, they also are located on a Canamex corridor, a planned Canamex corridor, which is basically the foreign takeover of our interstate transportation system. Now, this is highly significant because, one, if the Chinese get control of this highway system, and I believe they will, they'll control commerce and trade. Number two, this has military applications because one of the two reasons that Eisenhower brought in the Interstate Highway Act in the 1950s was to move troops quickly in case we were attacked in times of war. So this has military application as well. Gentlemen, I confess to you here, I think we are in a lot of trouble, and I don't see any way out of this. I think we've already been defeated from within.
Steve?
I second that. I do second that. Traitors from within, traitors from without. Probably the hardest topic I've ever spoken on or actually wrestled with the Lord on is this very topic tonight. So I think this is a watershed joint venture of Dave and I, Hodges, to bring to the American people the clarion call or the reality call. If you look at everything that's taken place, even in the positioning of troops out, on the Ukrainian western border and Russia's western border, Ukraine's eastern border, you're seeing a strategic buildup, and you're seeing the statements rising against NATO. The Russians know exactly what's going on, and quite candidly, the wrong policy is encirclement. What Vladimir Putin has done, and look, when I call him a genius, I'm not endorsing him. I want to make that clear. But when you've got someone that has the intense desire to pay back the United States for what was done to the former Soviet Union, which resulted in the breakup and obviously the Berlin Wall coming down and the breakaway republics gaining their autonomy, or let's say quasi-autonomy, the thing that's hard, Doug, is get the American people to understand that we're an occupied nation. All of the troops here have one goal. Dave, I don't know when you first heard about the numbers of foreign troops in this country, but back in probably 1995, it was in the 300,000 numbers, and people always said, well, where can they hide all those people? I don't see them. Well, if people will put themselves back into remembrance, under George Bush Sr., 100-plus bases were basically closed or seemingly closed. And guess what? Those bases were all Cold War bases that had extensive underground tunnels and extensive underground bomb shelters, if you will, nuclear fallout shelter capabilities. At the latest count, I'm told it's 865,000. And let me share something. I could not get numbers like that, even making them up. Those were given to me at the point in 1995, and later even into the 2007, 2008, when it was updated by four-star generals and Special Operations Command. So what I'm trying to tell people tonight is this. It's been said that, how do I say this? America would never be taken over from without, but only from within. And the rah-rah that, such and such a state has this many hunters or this many guns, it means nothing when you talk about modern warfare, drone warfare, electromagnetic weaponry, mind control Gwyn towers that are turned on and tuned in to the specific brainwave frequencies. Now, this isn't rah-rah. These are U.S. patents, Doug, Joe, and Dave. So here's where we're at. We are a nation prepared for destruction. This nation has made war on the living God. We've heard of the Air Force Academy, openly seeking Wiccan high priests and warlocks, and everybody in the world is welcome. Very inclusive, except, of course, the airmen that want to walk with Jesus Christ. Why this is important, it is a question of faith. When you see the entire moral fiber, and when I talk about moral, there was a time when the justice system at least sought for equity and sought for truth. The whole judicial system was based on evidence, and a man was presumed innocent until proven guilty. Now, basically, the only right in America, and I'm not kidding when I say this, and I stand by it, the only right you have in the globalist mind is to die. You just determine if it's at the point of a bayonet, a Hellfire missile, or starving in a FEMA camp. The fact that these people have put these things into play, and I'm not arguing tonight. I'm not arguing with the people that don't believe any of this stuff. They're simply going to die. The question isn't for those who won't listen and don't have ears. The question is for those who will listen and do have ears and eyes. What are we going to tell you? We're going to lay it out so clearly. It doesn't matter if it's the absolute amazing revelations of Golitsyn, Dave referred to it earlier, or Viktor Suvorov, or Vasily Mitrokhin, the highest-ranking KGB archivist, and where Golitsyn and some of the other ones, Bezimiansky, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right, but the point being is these guys told us how it was going to play out. Yet over and over and over, the New World Order was droning on. It started with George Bush Sr. and his, 235 references to it, you know? The thing that we're at right now is we're at a crisis point. And by the time tonight is over, I'm praying that God has such a baptism of revelation for His believers that they understand the serious nature of the hour. Going to church and listening to contemporary music, and I call it contemporary music, is not going to get a person into the kingdom of God, nor are listening to pissant sermons from pickpockets in the pulpits. Okay, there you go, Dave. Pissant sermons from pickpockets in the pulpit. So these are the things we've got to cover tonight, because I personally, and most people know this, I live in Bozeman, Montana. Bozeman is 80 miles north of Yellowstone Park. Instead of worrying when the supervolcano is going up, you got to worry about who owns Yellowstone Park. I can tell you, because of my location and all the years I've been on the radio, I've had National Park Service guys stop in my store in Bozeman and tell us that they were driving, I don't know if I've told you this, Dave, but Chinese dignitaries around, and he was literally tearfully in his, so shaken up, he said, we gave the Chinese Yellowstone for collateral, and I've been driving the bigwigs around. I personally have been in Yellowstone Park and the area around it in helicopters and seen, some of the biggest energy companies in the world from China, their Gulfstream jets parked at the West Yellowstone Airport. So the point that I'm trying to make to everyone, Dave made a very important and critical point. We, Doug, are at the position now of a destruction, implementation, and takeover. The takeover behind the scenes is a fait accompli. Now, that means the feat is accomplished. Now we basically are waiting for the eviction and being moved to whatever areas they want to move. Obviously, there are people that will resist, and I'm not one of those people that says you just basically go along with evil. I can build a scriptural base that obviously self-defense and providing for one's family's protection is totally biblical, whereas pacifism, surrender, and giving into evil is not what God called us to be. He called us to be overcomers, not succumbers. There's a twofold. You've got a left hand. You've got to deal with everything you can deal with. In the right hand, you trust the Lord. You don't lean on the arm of flesh, but you lean on His arm. So we're in that total takeover phase. We've already hoarded out our birthright. And you know, Dave, you know this, our children and grandchildren have no future apart from the Lord God of heaven taking them and protecting them, because these entities, and Doug, you referred to the general from China who basically said the only thing from stopping the Chinese from wiping out every man, woman, and child in the United States who's an American is whether their soldiers would go along with it or not. Is that not true?
That is exactly right. And Doug, I know you said that, haven't you?
Well, yeah, and this is referenced in various literature from, Unrestricted Warfare by two Chinese colonels that wrote this book. And of course, yes, I mean, it matches up. But gentlemen, let me ask you a question here, because I received an email right before the show, and I'm going to pose this to both of you, that, it was a really good email. I won't read it verbatim, but the essence of it is, you two have a message to give, and of course we know that ultimately we know how the story ends, but we can, for the people who are listening to and understanding this message, the emailer said, can we not do what we did, much like we did at the Bundy Ranch? Buy some time. All we need to do is show up and understand the message. The people who are listening to this message just understand the message, understand where we're at, and occupy until, of course, occupy. But I mean, this is not a message of all hope is lost. This is a message of understand the problem and work the problem. And that's the essence of the email. That's a pretty correct statement, isn't it, Steve and Dave? Steve?
Well, I disagree with that. I do, and I let me share this. I wouldn't be on talk radio if I didn't think we could affect a change. the change, so I see, is in a personal change and getting people who basically, have made the claim that they're Christians to understand that now their faith is going to be tested. Our faith is going to be tested. The thing is yes, we occupied the Bundy Ranch, but the only reason that went, and I want to say this, I give God the glory for that, all the brave men, Stuart Rhodes, the Oath Keepers, God bless everyone that was there. But what we do is buy time, Doug. And the situation is when people say they know how it plays out, I challenge them. What I will say to somebody, and if the listener wants to email you and you can read his answer, how does he think that is integrated? Because, again, we're talking about the Chinese colonels, we're talking about the white papers, we're talking about what we see going on in Western Europe and Eastern Europe. We see NATO, and by the way, the head of NATO is a former KGB agent. That's lovely. So the point that I'm trying to make is this, is that while we see all these things, I believe in being the salt of the earth. But I believe that the Christians have been so apathetic, and I'm saying this, the Christians. I don't care, I've had guys tell me that don't believe in God, I'll just rely on my shooting skills, my prowess, I don't need some, and then they make a disparaging comment about God. And I said, well, you go ahead, you lean on that, because I said the smallest germ can take the biggest man down. I said, but the goodness of God can blow all the germs away. I'm not how do I say this? I'm not an idealist, I'm a realist. But let's face it, we are a people now living actually in the twilight of our greatest years. And I'm telling you point blank, I understand what the emailer is trying to say, but can I be blunt? I want to know, and please, I don't say this to shame, I want to know what the people that make those comments have done, Doug, because I can tell you this, most of them that I know, and being on talk radio for 23 years or whatever, I know a lot of people, I just want to say that, I'm familiar with a lot of them, 99% of them who make that statement do absolutely nothing. Now, he may be the exception, okay? So my question isn't what's in your wallet, but what's in your heart, and how does that manifest in what you put your feet to, your hand to, and it's good. I get emails all the time. Well, if you were a real this or that, you go do this. My simple question is, where are you doing it? I hope I'm making myself clear. Dave, I'll let you respond to that, because that's one of my chief, what I would call, points of irritation when people make statements like that.
Dave, go ahead.
Yes, okay, I think I cut out for a second, but let me respond to what Steve was saying, and I would start by saying, onward, Christian soldiers. This Romans 13 nonsense is being preached from the pulpits, and Steve, I love that phrase about the pickpockets. But, if your church is a 501(c), you need to get out of it. If you're a pastor, you need to ask him, is he a member of the clergy response team or NOVAD? You need to get out of that church. You need to do home Bible worship. And, I'll speak as an old college basketball coach here. One of the things I know about putting together winning teams is you first must eliminate the factors within your team that cause you to lose. And we have some fairly prominent website masters in this country right now who are hailing Putin as a hero. And I'm thinking, are you out of your mind? Oh, he's a Christian. He's fighting the New World Order and the banksters. And Putin is a puppet like Obama's a puppet. In fact, today, if you go to the article I wrote on thecommonsenseshow.com, you'll see Putin and Obama almost shaking hands, and I wrote the caption in, shall we start a war together? And that is exactly how I see this man. And you people who see websites out there heralding Putin as a hero fighting against the New World Order, you need to run from that website. You need to basically disavow that work, because we need to band together. We need to know who our enemies are. And right now, America stands alone. Putin has effectively isolated us. He's turned the BRIC nations against us. He basically has China eating out of his hand because of the energy agreement that they've signed, where China will be the biggest importer of Russian natural gas in the world. And in exchange, they gave China mineral rights to some of their oil companies. We are surrounded, and we are infiltrated, and we are in a great deal of trouble. But I say onward, Christian soldiers. You know, maybe I'm stupid, guys, but I'm one of those guys that doesn't know how to quit. I will not stop talking as long as I have breath to talk, and if the day comes and I have to pick up arms, then that's what I'm going to do. And if Americans started adopting these kinds of attitudes, I don't know if at the end of the day we could win, but we can sure make it one hell of a mess for these people who are trying to destroy us.
Yeah, you know what, gentlemen? I probably did the emailer a disservice. Let me just clarify one thing. He ends it, or the last paragraph is, God has chosen you, the listener, to understand the message that will be given tonight. What are you planning to do? Dig a hole? No. Work the problem, and in so doing, create a revival. Get on your knees, and he gets into that the saying that we have to be proactive and work the problem as opposed to being just lumps on a couch, so to speak. So that was which I understand that, and he's actually crediting your information, Dave, and yours, Steve, as well, because you've done such a great job over the last number of years to get the information out there. Go ahead, Steve.
See, I would challenge that statement. I won't speak for my brother Dave, but I would challenge that, because and this is a question that I deal with the Lord at all times, even before going on the show tonight. Lord, where is the fruit of the warnings? Where is the result? Now, somebody says, well, you just got to trust God. The results are in His hand. But when it comes to righteousness, when it comes for standing up for Jesus, when it comes for being basically point on, and by the way, Dave, I obviously posted your story within 2 minutes of getting here, maybe 3 minutes, but I thought the one you did for today was probably one of the most succinct, and I'm not flattering you, it was the most important as needing to be told article. The bottom line, what people have settled for is a false conservatism that is basically, you don't want to offend anybody, you just try and slip a little truth in. I'm absolutely totally opposed to that. I call that weasel works, okay? If anybody wants to know my definition for weasel works. People, and I have, people in my family that think Fox is the ultimate source of truth, and I don't watch it. I can't. I guess it doesn't matter if you've got a full stomach. You throw up out of a full stomach or partial stomach. Now, why am I saying that? Because again, the hard issues won't be dealt with. The real issues. The fact is that all the mind control and what I call the drool, okay, of the salivating monsters that control network TV are their programming is designed to keep everybody in a stupor. So my definition of becoming active is getting marching orders, getting right with the living God, and getting marching orders from Him. And here's what I mean by marching orders. The truth is what sets a person free. But there is no truth apart from abiding in the Word of God and the Word of God abiding in us. That's what Jesus said when He made His statement that everybody quotes, and they always forget the first part, that ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. But the point that I'm trying to make right now is that when a nation, and here's what the proverb says, when the foundations be destroyed, what can the righteous do? The churches, and I hold them responsible. I think it was Charles Finney that always said, when he said, when destruction comes to America, it will be because the truth died in the pulpit first. All of the founding fathers, all their statements, for the record, are considered treason now. So when you allow the most vile, wicked, profane, disgusting, self-serving, traitorous, treasonous group of hellspawn to write laws that said they can kill you when they want to kill you, they can hold you without any form of regress, and you see absolute everything designed to make war on the American people. And I would say this, it's hundreds of billions of dollars, if not trillions of dollars, being spent to make war on one enemy, and who is that? It's the American people. The Chinese know they don't want to come in. I mean, who's one of the, Dave, you wrote about this in one of your articles, I think it was the 2 articles ago, that the Chinese are pushing to disarm Americans more or as much as Obama is. Hello, is that a wake-up call? You want to deal with that, Dave? Because you brought it up, and I thought it was excellent.
You're exactly right. After Sandy Hook, the Chinese officials came out in their own state-controlled media and said the Americans need to get a handle on gun control. What? Why are they worried about Sandy Hook? Well, the fewer guns that they have to take care of when they actually are rolled out in this country, the easier their job is going to be. So they were giving Obama a directive. Get busy and seize the guns, because we don't want to have to seize 300 million guns. And if you get 100 million of them, that'll make our job a whole lot easier. And so, yes, the Chinese have been very outspoken about the fact that we should not have private ownership of guns in this country. And you have to ask yourself why. Well, I'll tell you what my military sources tell me, and I'm going to try to connect a few dots here now. Number one, will they act against the Chinese and Russians if they act upon the American people? And the answer is they will if they think they have the support of the people. No revolution, no civil insurrection can succeed, and that never has in history, without the popular support of the people. They're waiting for us to act. This is why the Bundy event and other Bundy events that are soon to come are so important, that we get out and support the people who are beleaguered, because in that we might be guaranteeing the fact that most of the military will side with us. Secondly, my sources tell me that the deal has already been struck, and I've been very open in talking about this. The Chinese are going to get our mineral resources, whether you talk about the inland ports or the previously mentioned solar energy zones. Those have been promised to the Chinese. The Russians are going to get to keep the loot that they get when they come and haul you and your family out of your home, take you to a FEMA camp under FM 41.39. They get to keep everything that's in that house. That's what they have been promised. So this is going to be the carving up of the United States if we don't stand up. And Steve, kind of what we're alluding to, and I totally agree with your spiritual references, this is ultimately a battle that we have to win on a spiritual level. But we also live in the physical plane, and we have to be prepared as Americans to react physically. And that means standing up as Americans to show the military that we will side with them when the time comes.
Well said,
absolutely
Dave.
Agree with that.
Well said.
Yeah, and Dave, that's the same thing. And look, here's the deal. I couldn't have made contact with the people that I used to, quote, hang with and communicate with and get information from and do what I did in order to get the kind of information. Basically, it was because I was telling the truth. But one of the things that he asked me, one of the highest-ranking generals in the world asked me, he said, but who do we give it to, Steve? Where are the American people? It's like they worship the chains they live in, and you're asking us to take the chains off. He said if they would show, here's what he said. He said if they would show their strength of character, we would show our strength of arms. I've never said that before. Do you follow me? I never have said that before. So the point is that, I thank the Lord that He brings all things to remembrance. But here's what we're fighting for, ladies and gentlemen, and this is the toughest thing. And I want to share something. This is the saddest time for me to have to say this, because God didn't tell me, 2 Chronicles 7:14, if my people which are called by my name will humble themselves, seek my face, and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven, forgive their sin, and heal their land. He didn't tell me that. I think I was one of the first guys to announce on radio. Now, why am I saying this? It's to place you in time as to how long the long-suffering of Almighty God has been pleading with this nation. That's my calling, Dave, is to basically wake up the sleeping giant, but not so much wake them up, but resurrect them up. It's a matter of resurrection. Some people talk about revival. My statement has always been for a decade, revival doesn't work on cadavers. Resurrection does. So before we can, quote, watch it happen, and seriously, there's only one thing I know that will bring about the change. And Doug, here, I want to make it clear. I will resist evil no matter what it costs me to prevent innocent lives from being killed. I was vocal for 23 years on talk radio about abortion. I didn't even call it abortion. Now, why am I saying this? Because the sins of the people have gotten so great. And God's not just talking about the pagans. He's talking about His house. He's talking about the nonsense that goes on that basically fleeces the sheep, sells the wool, and if that isn't enough, it asks the sheep to come back
who's still got anything to live or to give to jump into the pot because they're going to serve everybody mutton. Of course, they're going to make sure they get paid for the mutton. In other words, these are not shepherds, they're wolves. And no offense, our wolf sensors should be going off in a horrific manner. Now, what Dave just said, he said the same thing I said. And let's make it clear for everyone. The misapplication of Romans 13. Romans 13 is talking about godly government. And I would encourage everybody in the world who is fighting with self-defense, all the things, thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not kill means thou shalt not murder. It is the New World Order. I've had some of their spokesmen in encounters laugh and say to me, you know, Steve, there may be a few of you, but the majority will just sit there and accept the bayonets or the bullet in the head. And I looked to the man, I said, Tex, I think you got a wrong idea. He's dead now, so I don't mind using his name. I said, but what I want to share with you is, and I said this to Tex, I said, look, I understand you guys control the money. I understand you control the weapons. I understand you control this and that and every other thing. But the one thing you don't control is God. And so the point is that, and Dave, I've literally had that conversation, so this isn't melodrama for the moment. This is a literal conversation. The idea is this, that in order for the jellyfish to get out of the aquarium, and I'm talking about people that just sit and watch television. By the way, I consider television now the ultimate aquarium, okay? Because you may not get it, but your entire world view is being formed by that hanging piece of effluent on the wall. Now, do I watch some TV? Yeah. I'm usually watching Ancient Aliens or something to see how bad they're going to twist the coming Messiah as being a global savior from Sirius or some other star cluster. But the point that I'm trying to make is this. Because the foundations are destroyed, now the righteous are asking, what can we do? And it's my opinion, Dave, that they better get on their knees and find out what God wants them to do, because the majority of the professing evangelical world has already surrendered through the very clergy response teams. And you and I both know, and I had a lying pastor in Bozeman send me a hateful email. I called him on the carpet. I said, I'll bring the lady in to talk to you that was there when the whole FEMA presentation, Department of Homeland Security was there, and he just wouldn't have it. He just got snide, and I thought, okay, Lord, I'll turn the other cheek. But maybe he better worry about somebody nicer than me having to deal with him when he sells them out, because this is one of the biggest churches in Bozeman. And I'm talking big. You know, Bozeman, maybe the biggest church is a couple thousand on a Sunday. But the point is that we are now dealing with a surrendered mentality from the pulpit. And Dave, I think you know this as well as I do from your sources. A lot of these, quote, pastors have cut side deals, which basically means do as thou will with the flock. Just leave me and my family alone. Is that an exaggeration?
Well, unfortunately, I've seen it in my own church. I was previously attending a church in Glendale, Arizona, and I'd been going there for over 25 years. And my pastor saw fit to stop preaching about abortion. He stopped preaching about infanticide. He stopped preaching about anything that violates the Word of God done by this government. And he began to have people come into the church to speak in public meetings like Congressman Trent Franks. And the last time that I actually set foot in the church, he had Franks in our church, and he played this 20-minute video that I've run on my articles. And it basically said that here's how an EMP attack would affect America. And I'm thinking, yeah, Franks, you know. You've been on the House Intelligence Committee. You know what's coming. You know who's planning it. And you're just telling us how it's going to be done. And yet we're inviting this man into the house of God, and he's part of the forces of subjugation. That's what I walked away from the church.
Wow.
Well,
Steve?
Doug, go ahead. I wanted to, and please, because I feel passionate about this subject, as Dave does, I want to give you plenty of time to, respond or ask,
No, Steve. Here's how I'd like to play it. You folks, both you, Steve, and Dave, you've got a lot of information to get out there, a lot of information to cover. We want to stay out of the way. So go ahead, Steve, and you superintend. You had the discussion on the dais here. You've got the floor. You go ahead and coordinate this. We're going to stay out of your way as much as possible because there's a lot of information. Reading, by the way, Dave, reading your articles, holy cow, going back into just a January. A lot of information about this, very, very specific information. So the sources and research you've done is incredible. So, but let me turn it back to you, Steve.
Well, Doug, let me say this.
Or go ahead.
Too. And I want to, and I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think this is important to say this because I echo what a lot of Steve said. When I sit down to the keyboard, I've already talked to my news director, Annie DeRiso, and I ask her, what's hot today? That's my favorite question to ask her. But I will tell you, I go through an internal process before I write. Sometimes I surprise Annie because I tell her I'm going to write about something, and then something else overcomes me. And it's because I say a simple little prayer, God, thy will be done. I am your instrument. And this is why my ego is not involved in my work. People sometimes call me terrible names, and they call me, Satan's servant. I'm a disinfo agent for the government. And none of that stuff sticks with me or bothers me because I feel in my heart I'm doing what I'm called to do. And I would call on all Christians that are fighting this fight to not let your ego get involved because you're going to be attacked. You have to just stay on course and keep walking straight ahead and serve the Almighty.
Amen to that, brother. Go ahead, Steve.
Amen. Well, I think what's astonishing, most people don't understand what the Open Skies Treaty is or how it was designed to basically give Russia overflight permission over the United States, continental United States, and territories, and we in turn could have the continental, their overflight. Putin revoked that, I believe it was maybe yesterday or the day before. But meantime, we have Russian inspectors in the Montana nuclear launch facilities up in Malmstrom Air Force Base, which is about, I think 221 air miles away from me. I may be off a few air miles, but it's north of us in Great Falls. It was a 564th Missile Squadron, and it was deactivated in 2008. They had an entire Russian contingency up there. Here's what it is. We used to laugh, Dave, and I've written about it, and I suspect you've talked about it or not, and also written about it over the years, but unilateral disarmament. What's the biggest point? If God would grant me one request tonight for everybody, is that the blinders off the blinders in their heart, which weighs everything out about how it's going to personally mess with their convenience, and then the blinders on their eyes, meaning that which keeps them from understanding. If he would just remove those blinders for let's say the next 3 days. Why I always ask that too. Somebody says, what do you always pray 72 hours for? I said, because that's how long Jesus went into, that's how long it was between the death of Jesus and the resurrection of Jesus. And I'm saying most of the people I'm talking to, and I mean this in the sense of they don't understand the level of evil that is coming against them. So when I hear every man, woman, and child is going to be murdered, now this, ladies and gentlemen, is in the Chinese war papers, and their lead generals, not just the colonels, but their lead generals, have said the only thing that would stop them is would their military follow through. That troubled me, Dave. And I've been wrestling with that, saying, Lord, how do I, in the time, and the reason I use the personal, reference, I try and share the struggle I have with people so they understand this is not an easy thing to do, especially when they don't want to hear it. So I said, Lord, what good does it do to speak? And somebody will always send me an email, well, to those of us who hear you. I understand that, but if enough heard, we wouldn't be facing unilateral surrender, the unilateral destruction. And what Dave said, Hawk heard in real time through a recording that was given to him. And Dave, I don't know if you remember, maybe we've talked about this, maybe not. I think I've talked about it on Doug's show before, but the Canadian generals talking about the stupid Americans that go into and his term, not mine, that go into the prison camps, that they don't understand that everything they own is the plunder that will be given to the soldiers that come to put them under. So once you go under, All your stuff is plunder. Heirlooms, antiques, guns and safes, everything they can get their hands on. So that's why it's imperative for the people of God to get the wisdom of God. If that means relocate, if God tells you to go someplace, He'll make a way. Someone said, well, how do you know when God's leading me? Simple. He isn't asking you to do it in your own strength. He'll make a way. Obviously, there's a lot of people that want to move to Montana, but they asked me to send them bus fare. Well, obviously, God didn't tell them to move here. They're just scared. Or maybe, wherever you guys live, Doug, I doubt anybody's moving to Erie, Pennsylvania, because that's in the heart of the beast. But the point is that the safest place is where the Lord wants us. So where does the Lord want us right now? I'm serious. He wants us baptized in the truth, because the greatest destruction has come as a byproduct of denial. And that's why, ladies and gentlemen, if you have not read the last two articles that Dave has posted on his site, you need to read those. Those are critical. And I'm watching it in real time. I live up in the West. I'm seeing in Bozeman, because we have an electronics research lab here at the university. A friend of mine who was a former FBI special agent in charge, he said, you know how many people we got to track at this university? He said that we know our foreign intelligence sources. I said, how many? He said, 400. And these are not minor players. 400, I think, 10, 12,000 people go to the university. So the point is that even in little old Bozeman, Montana, the delegations that are coming, now if you understand who our senators have been, Max Baucus, hello, guess what he just got appointed to? He got appointed to be the ambassador to China. Ding, 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 ding. John Tester went along with everything that Obama has signed up. We got one guy in Bozeman that's done a remarkable job in his campaign, and Steve Daines has been the only truth teller I've ever seen on a Pack of Lies. We also got a guy, this is the guy I'm voting for, Rosenberg, shows him out in the sky shooting down a drone. Anybody that put a political ad out where he's taking a shot at a drone, he's my kind of guy. And I'm serious. So we've got the dichotomy in Montana of being a very heavy kind of Western gun-oriented state, but we've got the most liberal senators and congressmen that have ever, attended the mausoleum in Washington. It is a perplexing time. Montana is also, Dave, you may know this, is a treasure state. Our gold, our silver, our copper, and platinum. Montana is the only state in the Union that has a significant platinum mine. It's called the Stillwater. Guess who owns it? The Russians. Does that maybe set it up for everybody? All of the mining claims around here that have been dormant, patented mining claims are being purchased by foreign interests. And these are horrifically famous mines and fantastically rich land. So guess what? It's on their checklist to do. So how do I say this? Ladies and gentlemen, in martial arts, Dave, you're a martial artist. The bottom line is you try, and especially in Aikido, use the force of the opponent against him. Well, a good boxer knows how not only to throw a punch, but how to dodge a punch. And so the thing is that what I'm trying to say to you is learn how to slip the punch that's coming. Learn how to step across yourself without, tripping over your own shoelaces. So what we're saying is this, and we're both saying this, it is a plan that's in motion. It is time for you to realize what is at stake. And I'm going to turn right over to you now, Dave. If people don't care about their lives, how do I inform them? How does Dave Hodges, how does Doug or Joe Hagman, how do we get you to care about your families if you just want to turn this off? And I wrote, forgive me, I didn't write it. I posted in my alert section, Jim Willey, and he's got an amazing, I guess you'd say, overview of the psychology of people who live in denial. And I'll read that a little later in the show, but if you want to read it ahead of time, go to my alerts. It's under Jim Willey. And the thing is that now we're at this point of no return. So I know this. When you're dealing with impossible odds, the strength and determination of your will set in total surrender to God's will, that's what miracles are made of. The Bible's promise for the last days, and they that know their God shall be strong and do exploits. Go ahead, Dave.
Well, how timely is your statement? in comparison to what I did yesterday. As part of our family Easter celebration yesterday, we went up into northern Arizona and went to a lake and had the typical family picnic. One of my wife's relatives, a young guy who's now out of the Marine Corps, he was in high-level tactical operations in Korea, took out Korean officials. So it kind of gives you an idea at the level he was operating at. He listens to my show. He reads a lot of the articles that I write. And he really tried to engage me yesterday in a conversation about what's coming. And I told him what was coming, and he said, "You're saying exactly what some of my confidential sources told me when I was in the military." He said, "When the Chinese and Russians show up at your area, they're not taking any prisoners. The people who are in the camps will be sucked into the camps by taking their kids from school, come here to get food. But when they begin to go from town to town and house to house, they're not just going to seize guns. They're going to create corpses." And what he said to me yesterday, he said, "You know what's coming. You've never been in the military. You're not in the best of shape, but you're not in bad shape. But you've been a former college athlete." He said, "You and I need to start doing tactical operations and training." And so this is exactly what he and I and my son and a couple of other relatives are going to commence doing as of next week. He said, Steve, what you said in different words. He said, when they show up, you need to be where they're not. He said, I know what forces they're going to bring against us. And he said, I've got my M16, I got my AK-47, I've got a grenade launcher that I stole from the military. He said, that's not going to save me. I need to learn how to live off the land. I need to learn how to be mobile, and so do you and your family. And ultimately, you know, we're not going to all be called, I think, to go on the run, but we all need to be prepared to be Minutemen, because this is the time we face. The British did not come into the colonies with the notion of exterminating all the colonists. They were simply trying to eradicate the merchant class so they could keep complete control over the economy. These Chinese and Russians are going to look to exterminate us. And the sooner that we wake up to this fact, the sooner we'll start taking the precautions that we need to take.
Steve, go ahead.
I agree with that. Thank you, Dave. God bless you for that. Because, ladies and gentlemen, you've got to get beyond the point, a lot of you, where what purpose do we have to tell you this unless, number one, we're insane, which I know, Dave, there's a lot of people that accuse me of that, or we're genuinely called of God, and then Jesus sent them out by twos. And I've noticed, Doug, on your show, the central theme is if it's Dave and I or whoever you have on plus someone else, the twos are going out there. But in the mouth of two or three witnesses, let every word be established. I want to read this. May I read? And nobody knows I won't read obviously his name, but I want to read. May I read that on the air? 8 years in the Air Force.
Oh yeah, please. That's why I sent it to you.
Yep. Okay. 8 years in the Air Force, an Air Force vet. I concur with Steve and Dave, and this was sent not to me, it was sent to Doug. God bless you, brother, who sent this. Just today, I concur with Steve and Dave. We are destroyed from within. Just today, a roll call, we were briefed to support a fundraising event for transsexual and homosexuals. It's mainstream now. In other words, that's a push in the military. Well, most of you don't know this, but McCain went to, I believe it was Lithuania, and to assure them that we would stand with them and everything. Do you know what his number one charge was, though? Not just the promising the American dollars, that they would accept the push for gay marriage. Now, that came from somebody who's really high up. You see, God's not given us what I call weasel bait. He's given us the whole Megillah. He's given us the biggest presentation of truth that any group of people have ever been presented with, even in the ancient battles, and you can study ancient military warfare, but those people, and what this was surprising, when their lives were at stake, they took not only evasive action, but they took basically proaction. Now, here's what I mean by proaction. so it's not misconstrued. I believe that every head of the household, just like Dave had a family altar service, a family, worship service, a time of getting together and just celebrating the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And by the way, the reason I tripped myself up there, I believe every day should be the birth and resurrection of Jesus Christ in somebody's life, okay? Someone says, well, where do you stand on Easter? I don't. Where do you stand on Christmas? I don't. I stand on the finished work of Jesus Christ, which is a daily thing. And I've actually tried to come up with a name for the birth of Jesus and the resurrection of Jesus combined, okay? And I never succeeded. But what I'm trying to say is this, is that we are foolish to not believe that everything we have is going to be taken as plunder. Actually, Dave, you'll find this interesting. I stood in the townhouse I'm renting, and I looked at all the stuff I got. And I used to be a collector of ancient, like I've got some swords, and I got like old manuscripts and maps from, Ortelius, one of the most, just some stuff, and ship models and all that. And you know what I did? I looked at it and I say, well, I hope they enjoyed it as much as I did, because it dawned on me, none of this stuff I can take with me, and I don't mean to heaven. I just mean in a moment's notice. You said something. That's why they call them a Minuteman. Well, most people are so groggy they need to be called hour men. And the deal is, it's the hour that is soon to be upon us. By the way, no pun intended, but Jesus said he'd keep us from that hour that's coming upon the earth to try the men and women on the earth if we would but look to him. And that's not a pre-tribulation rapture. Get that out of the way. It is, God is the only one. Jesus said, when in the Lord's Prayer, lead us not into temptation and deliver us from the evil one. It's not just the evil in the original language, it's the evil one. So the point I'm trying to make is simply this. Every time Dave and I check sources, and maybe in the next hour we'll just talk about some of the things that we both get, independent of each other. And Doug, you obviously can throw in the ones you get. It's the same. It's like I said, never in the history of the world has so much evidence been presented to a people who are slumbering in the dust of death to wake and shake themselves off from the dust of death. And unfortunately, too many churches are talking about fairy dust, if you know what I'm talking about. The blood of the martyrs is being spilled around the world, and they still want, glitter being thrown in the HVAC system to make it think that somehow God's digging his heels in, I mean, no disrespect to the Lord, into heaven, because this stuff's taking him by surprise, and by digging his heels into the streets of golden heaven, it's somehow falling to earth. I don't think so. Go ahead, Dave.
Oh, you just nailed it. You nailed it right on the head. We have totally lost our way, and I think it does go back to what I refer to as the boob tube, and you've alluded to that earlier. And people have this false paradigm. Someone will ask me a question, and gentlemen, I'll answer them like, well, I see it this way, and then you'll get this standard response. You're a conspiracy theorist. And I look at them and I'll tell them, I think you're a coincidence theorist, and you're showing me that Wall Street marketing on TV works very well. What do you mean? You just had a programmed response. And people are programmed that when they hear us declaring the truth, and we can have evidence 9 times Sunday lined up with links to everything and double and triple source our material, and people still will not believe it.
That's very true, Dave. And Steve, I just, I believe that the people who are deliberately tuning into this program tonight are receiving, they're appointed, really. God chose you folks to receive and understand the message that is being given by these two gentlemen. Don't you agree, Steve?
Well, absolutely. I believe that again, that the reason Dave does what he does and I do what I do is because we love people. We're trying to save their lives. This isn't about making points, and it's certainly not about winning friends and influencing people. It's about influencing people, but say, look, disregard us for a moment. Look at what you see around us. If you want to be empirical, why is literally tens of billions of dollars, hundreds if you add in all the armored personnel carriers. Why? Look at the militarization of police. Ladies and gentlemen, the bad guys is us. They're blowing away men, women, and children. Police out of control. They are absolutely killing children. They're killing women. They're violating them. I can't go there. They're doing every single profane, disgusting. It's like this. It's like they are trying to provoke. Now, I don't believe in provocation, to responding to provocation, but I believe in when that day comes that those who know how to go proactive. Look, I've never been in the military, but obviously when you start to take tactical training, you know what your opponents are like. And ladies and gentlemen, Russian special forces are not nice people. And I think the thought of abusing my wife or my daughter or my sons, and by that I mean literally being raped. And I've been checked, Dave. I can only go so far, but I know what they're going to do. I actually was given a panoramic vision of the end times 43 years ago when I got saved. And I think deep in my heart, I've never wanted to go there, meaning I don't want to talk about it because it's so graphic. One of the things I'll just say, and then I'll turn it over to Dave and we go into the next hour, Doug, is I remember the very first show I did on KHNC, Talk Radio, Johnstown, Colorado. If I'm not mistaken, somebody can correct me. I think I started out with a couple hours a day, and I don't even remember. I mean, I was doing 3 hours a day and then talk shows, blah, blah, blah. But what the Lord showed me 43 years ago is now coming to pass. He said the two most precious commodities in the end times before my return would be fresh water and edible food. That's when he told me I would have a Joseph's ministry. I didn't know a Joseph. I didn't know any Joseph. So that didn't mean anything to me until the years would play out. But what we're in effect tonight is we're giving you the truth. So when there's a famine in the land for the truth that's coming, when the total biometric control of all your thoughts and everything you become, those of you who live under the tyranny of the jackbooted thugs, those who basically would never stand up ahead of time, you'll be forced at some point to make the eternal decision for your eternal soul. And that's when we talk about, I got into a fight, it's not for this show, but with my emailers, where some people say, well, hell, there is no such thing as eternal damnation. It's just a cessation of soul. That's total heresy. Look up in the concordance how many times Jesus talked about hell. He said where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth and where there's smoke ascends forever. So saying all that, Doug, I think we need to take a break. When we come back, just give it to Dave and let him respond. Because, again, this is important. We're vying for your lives, ladies and gentlemen.
Absolutely. Very important. And with that, we will take a break. Folks, you're listening to the Hagman and Hagman Report on this Monday, April 21st, 2014, with our special guest, Steve Quayle from SteveQuayle.com and Dave Hodges, TheCommonSenseShow.com. Both gentlemen we're very honored to have on tonight. And we'll be back after these short messages. Stay with us for another 2 hours.
Hi folks, Doug Hagman here. You might know me as the co-host from the Hagman and Hagman Report, or as a frequent guest on Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie. If you're like me, you're tired and confused over today's headlines. You just don't know where to turn for accurate, concise information about really what's going on, what's truly going on in today's society. If you don't know where to turn for accurate, well-researched, and properly vetted news, I've got a suggestion. In fact, it's a requirement. Bookmark Canada Free Press. That's CanadaFreePress.com on the internet. It's just not for Canada. It's for news across the world. Judy McLeod, founding editor, has put together a vast array of talented writers like Kelly O'Connell, Daniel Greenfield, Dr. Eilena Johnson-Powell, a lot of guest columnists, very talented writers. Folks, that's Canada Free Press at CanadaFreePress.com. Now mobile friendly. Follow on Facebook, because without America, there is no free world.
It's hard to imagine when things are going reasonably well, just how quickly things can change. But what would it take? Economic collapse? massive crop failure, chemical or biological attack. So many situations could find you in the grocery looking to pick up food for your family only to find that the shelves are empty. There's nothing. Don't let that happen. Act today to make sure that if it ever comes to that, you and your family will be provided for. Visit freezedryguy.com to look at the wide variety of survival foods available. Freeze-dried foods from the Freeze Dry Guy store longer, rehydrate faster, are nutritionally superior to, and taste better than any other long-term storage food available. Visit freezedryguy.com or call toll-free 866-404-3663. freezedryguy.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, the very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no secret is revealed. That is why the Athenian lawmaker Solon decreed it a crime for any citizen to shrink from controversy. I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people, confident that with your help, man will be what he was born to be, free and independent.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Hour number 2 of the Hagman and Hagman Report on this Monday with our very special guest, Steve Quayle from stevequayle.com and Dave Hodges from The Common Sense Show. We're going to turn it right back over to Dave Hodges to pick up in the second hour.
Boy, did I love your intro there with Kennedy's Secret Societies speech. And as I sit here and I wrote this on Easter Sunday, I said, freedom doesn't come from government. Freedom is granted to us by God. We have the freedom to choose our salvation, our own condemnation, and ultimate demise. And he captured a lot of those feelings in that speech. It also speaks to the fact that all of us have to be on guard. All of us have to become Christian soldiers, not armchair soldiers, and not necessarily people that pick up guns and are prepared to fight the Chinese and Russians, but everyone has a role to play. And I'm thick-headed, and God was patient with me. God revealed the truth to me back in 1980 when he revealed to me the existence of the Trilateral Commission. I learned about it by chance. Well, gosh, I was only 7 years behind the times. And I ignored it because my life was working well. And then almost 12 years ago, the forces of John McCain and the New World Order tried to steal my land and that of 2,000 of my neighbors. And somehow someone put a microphone in front of my face and said, well, you're the spokesperson, Dave. And I started doing media appearances, and I got a local radio show in Wickenburg, Arizona, on the late Pete Peterson show. And God was training me. God was bringing me up in the purpose that He wanted me to serve in. And all of my past experiences, I look now, have prepared me for the moment that I'm in. This is why when Steve says, we don't do this to get rich, we don't do this for fame or notoriety, that's exactly right. This is why I have so much respect for Steve, because I know where he's coming from. And Doug and Joe, I know that you're of the same mindset. This is about saving humanity. And one of the things that I hope Steve will talk about tonight is his book, Exogenesis, because if they can't control us and win that way and get our soul and get control of our Christian-based destiny where we serve Jesus and ultimately go to heaven, what they want to do is to destroy humanity. And Steve really captures that in his book. We're not just in a fight for the survival of our Constitution and our nation and the right to exist and live. We're fighting for the existence of humanity. This is ultimately what it comes down to. And if we break this down to brass tacks, the baseline variables involved here, it's good versus evil, it's Satan versus Jesus. And I am not being extreme when I say that, because when you read Steve's book, you can draw no other conclusion as to what the ultimate goal is, and that's the destruction of humanity and our eternal damnation.
And Steve,
I think that's the bigger.
Yeah, I apologize for, but I got to tell you, I think your latest book, Steve, is perhaps the greatest book. It ties everything together, and I'm not saying that just to say it. I'm saying that because I've read it, and a lot of my questions, and folks, a lot of your questions will be answered by that book as well. Go ahead, Steve.
Well, I think the movie that's out right now that's not doing too good in the box office, I haven't seen it, I will see it. It's Transcendence with Johnny Depp. And the thing that people don't understand is this. There's only two groups of entities that are out there that want to destroy every man, woman, and child. That's number one, the fallen angels, and number two, the governments that are under their control. I never thought, Doug, when I started getting into this whole realm, of Genesis 6 and fallen angels and a supernatural, meaning above the normal intelligences, hating mankind so much that they will do everything and have tried both before the flood and after the flood. There were giants both before the flood and after the flood because there were fallen angels that came and had sexual relations with earth women. By the way, I won't argue the whole Sons of Seth heresy. Dante Forston, who I post his articles, has done probably the best job of laying that out. Here's the deal. Everything that has been going on in the world of black operations, now you can take this to the Lord in prayer. I've never said, nor will I say, take anything because I say it is true. I'll share it with you. You want to believe it. If it rings true in your spirit, then take it to the Lord and find out. Jesus made it so simple, and I'll use this scripture until he comes. But if I've told you earthly things and you believe me not, how can I tell you heavenly things? And Xenogenesis is talking about the corruption of the human genome to the point where there is no longer any humanity left. In its place will be a composite, hellish creation that absolutely is are automatons and totally under the will of Satan. With the ultimate prize is you're going to be like God. Seems like that promise was made 6,000 years ago, but it's like it is right now. So in Xenogenesis, I lay out the development of the transhuman movement. I quote all the most famous guys, Huxley, and not only Aldous, but, ladies and gentlemen, the point is if you understand the Orwellian overtones of all this, if you understand that some of these people are scared to death of dying, and Jesus said, fear not him who can kill the body, but rather fear him who can kill your body and send you into hell. So that's God. The point being is Ray Kurzweil in his whole singularity, and the singularity is when men become machines and machines become men. And Doug, it was only a week ago, Dave, I know you saw it, the article about robot wars on the front of Drudge, left-hand column, third or fourth story down. Do you remember seeing that?
I saw
sure
that.
do, and
yeah.
So
it's the fulfillment of what you wrote about.
Yeah. So here is the thing, ladies and gentlemen, and please, I know that the freedom that Dave Hodges has on the radio is a gift from the Lord. I know the time I have, and Doug and Joe have. And Doug and Joe have presented a platform where people that really know what's going on in certain areas are giving it to you. And what I like about Doug and Joe so much, and number one, they love Jesus, but number two, they don't have their agenda. So many times when I do talk radio, and I don't know if it's the same with you, Dave, and that's why I'm very choosy about who I do talk radio on, and I don't do much anymore, is because they want me to build their New Age case. They want to basically soundbite me, or they want to basically take what I'm developing and giving them Jesus. They want everything I know, but not with Jesus, okay? And everything I know is because of Jesus. And here's the thing. We are now in a technological race with oblivion. You know, it's fascinating. Hollywood is pre-positioning neurolinguistic terms. They're showing you what's going to happen. And Johnny Depp's latest movie, Transcendence, I've watched the trailers. I've read a bunch of stuff on it. There's some great posts on it. I posted a good article today by somebody who really gets it. But I have a feeling the reason why that's not doing so good is even the Prince of Darkness doesn't want it basically as well known as it could be. I'm sharing this with you. I know a lot of people don't like movies. I'm not telling you to go to movies. But I am telling you it is the most important thing that I've ever written, and it's the end of everything I've written about. In other words, it's everything that I've ever done in ancient history points to this time. Everything I've done in myths and legends points to this time. Right now, I'm talking about whatever we are, the 21st of April, 2014. There's nothing more I can say. Oh, I could have given more proof text. I could have given 800 footnotes instead of 400 or whatever. But the point is, ladies and gentlemen, Chapter 1 was written by Doug Hagman and with some amazing help from an insider. Is that safe to say that, Doug?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Chapter 13 was the ultimate insider, a very high-ranking CIA guy whose deathbed confession is different than anything. And I've interviewed a lot of those people. I've talked to a lot of them, but Chapter 13 blew my mind, and because of a very astute brother in the Lord, God bless you, Will, again, God bless you, gave that to me and permission to publish it, it will blow your mind. And just the whole thing about even the rainbow, what it meant from God's perspective, versus there's a reason why the gay and lesbians and everybody are taking that boundary. If you understand what the rainbow was, it was God's covenant with man not to destroy the earth by water, but it was also, if you will, a harmonic gate. Every color has its own frequency, and those frequencies held back the powers of hell and the powers of darkness. Now with chemtrails and HAARP, and oh, by the way, today, over Bozeman, I'm in helicopters a lot and airplanes a lot. I can promise you that they were spraying at 2,000 AGL, Dave, 2,000 feet above ground level today. And, you know, the point being is that it kind of drifted my direction, so I rebuked it in Jesus' name. I got little 8-year-old. I have a little dear friend, a little Christian girl, 8 years old. God bless you, Maddie. And she may be 8 or 10. Forgive me if I forget her age. But when she sees those things, she rebukes them in Jesus' name, and she believes that Jesus is going to, stop that stuff. And I pray for the day they start falling from the sky. I'm not kidding when I say that. So in Xenogenesis, I lay it out in such a way that by the time you're done with that book, ladies and gentlemen, and by the way, they're selling those things on, evidently somebody's buying them from me surreptitiously and selling them on Amazon way more than I sell them for. And so, you can usually, and I better make this clear, I don't sell books on Amazon. I sell them on my website. And the only place you can get them, unless someone's doing, pirated versions on Amazon or trying to get more than I sell them for, is basically by going to my website, stevequayle.com. Now, again, I'm saying this. If you read that book, I promise you that you may have 100 pieces of the puzzle, you may have 200 pieces of the puzzle, but it's safe to say, is it not, Doug, when they read that book, they'll have the total puzzle.
Oh, I got to tell you, Steve, I had a lot of questions leading up to that book, although you did a fantastic job from Genesis 6 Giants forward. But, folks, let me just say this. Reading Xenogenesis really answered a lot of questions I had, and I got to tell you did a fantastic job in tying the pieces together in that book. And that's all I really, I mean, that educated me more about, like you said, how much these Luciferian satanic power elite hate humanity. It's incomprehensible until, well, of course, until you read the book.
Well, and again, that's not where we're headed. That's where we're at now. And I am convinced with DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, and others, I'm convinced that super soldiers exist. I remember when I started talking about night vision contact lenses. People thought that was way out. Well, they've got it. It's kind of the Steve Austin of the Bionic Man on steroids now. And the point is that by taking specific traits of animals, especially enzymes that are in tigers or cheetahs, and basically splicing those into the human genome, these guys are after monsters. And that's why xenogenesis is basically just telling you, the genetic Armageddon was today's technology, tomorrow's monsters, and now xenogenesis is turning men into monsters. And this is exactly, even the Book of Jubilees talks about women will give birth to monsters. Last week, I saw this story arise again that I posted about a month ago about satyrs. Here's the big deal, Doug, and I got to make this clear. The reason I talk about this stuff, and I try and do it as gentle as I can, I'm serious. This time, and for the record, ladies and gentlemen, I do not watch horror stories. I do not watch vampire movies. I do not watch, I like Godzilla movies just because I can remember Godzilla, watching the animation was so bad. I laughed at, started watching those at 8 or 10, and I still watch them. And my wife looks at me and she says, "Why do you like those things so much?" I said, "Too much history, but if you understand how they film those things," and I was a film major, graduated from film school, blah, 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 but it was interesting. So what am I saying? If you understand xenogenesis and understand the xeno part means a third set of chromosomes added in the human DNA and a human, if you will, genome, then you can understand that you can take animals, you can do, and this is where sexuality is headed. Sexuality is headed into barbarism and bestiality. And when I tell you they're creating things in labs that, and I won't go into the details because the children may be listening, when they're creating sex bots and sex creatures, I can only share this with you. You cannot believe the amount of money going into that. And that's a sick thing. And by the way, I want to share this with everybody. If everybody can't figure this out, Jesus cursed the fig tree at the root. You can talk about the fruit of evil until you're blue in the face, but until you understand the root of evil, every perversion goes back to fallen angels, and I believe that the fallen angels, and by the way, the Bible says they can transform themselves into angels of light. I believe what you're seeing in the rich and powerful, in many cases, not all cases, you are seeing those entities calling the shots from behind the scenes. I do not believe humans. You can blame the Rothschilds, and they're to blame, and the Rockefellers and all the big families of the world, but behind them are supernatural entities. One last statement. Fallen angels don't die. Giants died. The giants, when they were killed, for instance, Goliath, half-human hybrid spirit, fallen angel, became a demon. Those demons from the giants who have been Jesus, when they walk the earth, they're looking for a home, ladies and gentlemen, and guess what? Better Homes and Garden in the demonic realm is very, and I'm not saying that publication is demonic, but they are looking for a better home. And the reanimation of so many of the mummies, the Egyptians believed the time would come when their pharaohs, their god kings, would be reanimated, and that's where we're at in history. Xenogenesis is the most important thing I've ever written, and if you want to be able to deal with the horrific creatures that are coming and already here, but when they finally get released and they're billed off as alien saviors or those who are overseers, overlords, whatever they're going to call them, if you can have the understanding, you don't have to be afraid of what's coming down, because Jesus said you'll know the truth and the truth will set you free, and that he'll give you power to tread on serpents and scorpions. What is a serpent and a scorpion? They both have poison that can kill you. And over all the power of the enemy, it's a question of faith. So you can't hightail it and run. You've got to face it in the power of Almighty God. And that's where all of our hopes, all of our victories, and all of our strength lie. Go ahead, Dave.
Well, two things. One is just to reflect on a couple of ex-NSA people. One of them is passed. The other has gone dark. But my news director, Annie DeRiso, and I knew them both well. The latter one, who's gone dark, used to spend great amounts of time with me in the 90s. And I kept wondering, why am I doing this? Why am I talking to this guy? Because I wasn't broadcasting, I wasn't writing, I wasn't in crisis yet in my fight against the New World Order that would bring me into this journalistic realm. But I couldn't back away from this. And at the time, this gentleman was living in Mesa, Arizona, and I'd travel across Phoenix and spend nearly every Saturday with him while he educated me. And let me tell you what he said. This top-level person who served in NATO as a member of the NSA, he said that they were taught in their indoctrination that what's going on here on the planet is the manifestation of what's been going on in the heavenly realms for eons, where it's good versus evil. They want to possess our soul, the evil ones do, and if they can't possess our soul, they're going to destroy humanity. And this is really what Steve's book really encapsulates and captures. The other thing I wanted to mention, too, is you were talking about movies. I do go see movies, and I don't see a lot of them. I maybe see, one or two every 5 or 6 weeks. But I go see movies for the same reason that I read my Gannett Broadcasting-owned newspaper called the Arizona Republic. I want to see what the enemy's up to. It educates me. It enlightens me as to what they're thinking. It's kind of back to my days as a college basketball coach when I would go scout my opponents to learn about their game plan so I could better prepare for them. And that's what I do here. And one of the movies that I wanted to bring up, I haven't seen the recent one, Steve, that you talked about, but I did see Elysium, and I actually wrote an article on it. And Elysium, if you recall, was the complete bifurcation of society between the ultimate haves and the majority of have-nots. And the people of the haves had the power of life and death and all the extremism that we know and the Agenda 21 themes that are so prevalent. And it really enlightens me when I see this. It reinforces and makes it real for me that this is ultimately what they have in mind for us, those of us that they let survive, which is going to be a relatively small percentage. Then two other movies that really influenced me, too, was The Hunger Games. Two of the Hunger Games movies, they're coming out with a third part next year. But it really shows the viewer what's it like to live under Agenda 21. So you don't even have to read Dave Hodges or Steve Quayle. This stuff is all out there in the movies. And you're right, Steve. I do believe it's some type of psychological pre-programming. It's a desensitization strategy. Expose it to us in small quantities until we get used to it. And when the whole scenario is unveiled, then we have grown accustomed to it and we'll accept it without question. Again, I go back to my clarion call. We are all soldiers against this kind of takeover. And if you call yourself a Christian, it is time for you now to stand up and proclaim the truth and denounce this evil and not support it any longer. I mean, people tell me I'm so extreme because I say Obama's a traitor to his own people. I respond with this statement. Please tell me one thing that Barack Obama has done to improve the plight of the middle class. Just name one. And to a person, I can ask an Obama phone user, what has Obama done for you that's really significantly improved your life? There's not one thing. But I'll tell you, the laundry list runs around my house several times of the things he is doing to destroy this country and the American people within it. And there again, I come back to, you want to go down without a fight, you want to go down without a whimper. That's foreign to my thinking. I can't accept that. Maybe I'm a born fighter, I don't know. But I know one thing. I'm going to fight this tyranny with my last breath, because I believe this is what God commands us to do. He commands us to be brave in the face of evil, not to cower away from it and submit to it. And this is why I'm hoping that the people listen to this show. If I only influence one person, or Steve and Doug and Joe only influence one person, these 3 hours that we're spending together are worth it. Because if we don't band together, we're certainly, as Benjamin Franklin once said, we're all going to hang together.
Amen, brother. Go ahead, Steve.
Doug?
No, I'm good.
Well,
go ahead.
You know, I echo what Dave is saying, and the thing is that's why agreement and prayer. Let me share this. I believe in the prayers of God's people and then doing what he tells them to do. When Henry Gruver had his vision, and Dave, I don't know if you've seen it, but it's Henry Gruver, G-U-R-V-E-R, Gruver's vision of, the invasion of the Russians and Chinese on the West Coast. One of the interesting things that he saw were the people that were praying and literally seeking God. I'm not talking about, Sunday Christians. I'm talking about people that have a walk with the Lord. He saw areas where literally the invading armies went around them. It was like there was an invisibility shield. He also saw the entire Cascadia range of volcanoes from basically Washington all the way down to Mount Shasta going up, and the lava literally overwhelming the troops that were on the ground. In other words, they made it so far. It sounds like they made it to the eastern slopes of the Cascades, and then they all blew. And let's just say this, they were running for their lives, and he saw them then getting on their ships and going back. I don't know the timing of that, but I will say this, that I think it was 2013, the Lord showed Henry a lot of the invasion, the Russian invasion, coming up to the Columbia River. Please, ladies and gentlemen, go to the Columbia River. I have had personal contact with people who have gotten a hold of me and talked about all the Russian warehouses along the Columbia River filled with weapons. And I want to say that again, warehouses along the Columbia River, seemingly innocuous, filled with weapons. So the pre-positioning of men and materials in this country is an accomplished fact. Now, you've got to ask yourself this. The tanks, if we're supposedly backing NATO and against Russia, and by the way, I'm a believer in not surrounding Russia. I'm a believer in not taking this thing to World War III, and I'm not saying the United States is right in anything they're doing in their foreign policy, so that's for Winston's sake, Doug. The point is that, it's not our side versus their side. It's God's side versus the devil's. But, ladies and gentlemen, there are stories showing all the tanks from Western Germany and NATO countries being brought back to the United States to be used against us. Our little armory in Bozeman, Montana, never had any armored vehicles. They had Humvees, and they had trucks, and they had a couple of retrieval vehicles. Man, last time I was just out in that area, we had probably 14 or 16 totally armed, tread vehicles. They had Bradleys, and they had the different designated artillery pieces, a couple tanks, I think 2 or 3 tanks. And the deal is that this is Bozeman, Montana. Well, if you go north of us by about 200 miles, you get into Whitefish, Kalispell area. I mean, the amount of run-ins with Russians, and I want to get to that, Dave, because your sources and my sources, we both have had too many emails and really good intel sources not to believe that what we're saying is true. I mean, I've told this story over and over and over. Look, you could believe one guy maybe is hallucinating, 2 maybe they had a bad dose of PCP, I don't care what it is, but when you get hundreds and hundreds of witnesses, and these people are Christians, and they're dedicated Christians, and they know the admonition of the Word of God not to bear false witness, and yet they're running into them, and even having the Russians telling them they're here to take away the guns in some cases, I got to tell you something. To my knowledge, and I'll say this, anybody who denies that from this point on to me is nothing more than one of them. I want to make that clear. If you deny in the face of the preponderance of overwhelming evidence that they're here to do that, then you're on their side. And I mean that, because the sides are being drawn. There comes a point when denial becomes deadly. There comes a point where friendship becomes betrayal, or casual relationships can turn terminal. And I've watched that happen, Doug, and I've watched it too many times in my own life with, quote, proposed or supposed brethren, only to basically, watch them pull their knife out. And look, people say to me sometimes, they say, well, you just got to have tougher skin. Well, I'll tell you what, I learned to stand and face the enemy. You guys have hightailed it, hidden out, and sit in nameless boards. And I want to share something else. We are now at the time where people who make excuses, I love, Dave, what you said when people make that statement to you, because you're a lot nicer than I am. When they say to me, you're a conspiracy theorist, you're a fearmonger. By the way, the word fearmonger is a specific neuro-linguistic programming term that when people use that against me, and I don't I'm not against the person, but I go, they've already been mind controlled. They have buzzwords, they have keywords, they have trigger words, and that's what we're dealing with even now on talk radio, Dave. And this is the thing, people say we shouldn't pay so much attention to your critics. It's not the critics. It's the spirit behind the critics. This is the age of betrayal. And by the way, I go to movies too. I'm just saying, if some people don't, I honor that. But the people that don't can't get mad at those of us who do, because God says, I want you to go see this, Steve. For instance, Jack the Giant Killer. That was a silly little movie, but there was a lot of truth in it, except they changed some of the wording, fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman. They changed some of that around. And for the record, ladies and gentlemen, the giants hunt by the DNA signatures and the frequencies of the blood. In other words, when Abel's righteous blood called out to God, Abel's blood, just like your blood, has its unique song. It has its unique sound. And that's when they changed that. I said, yep, I know who wrote this thing. So the point is that there are things to be gleaned. What person listening to the show, if they're our age, Dave, my age, Doug, your age, you're younger, and especially Joe, you're really younger, but Star Trek was probably the greatest introduction into the world of advanced technology. And for most people that don't know this, Gene Roddenberry had a unique ongoing relationship with the Central Intelligence Agency. When most of these movies come out, the same thing that is done with the World Weekly News, the National Enquirer, and all the, quote, rags, the point is that they would float the truth in those because people automatically assume that anything that's in those magazines can't be true. That's what television has done. Now what do we see? We see zombie movies, and I think that Walking Dead is the number one show on TV. If I'm wrong, correct me, ladies and gentlemen. I don't mean to be misleading. I just saw that. The Vampire Diaries, the whole thing with the blood, and you need the blood, and it's not only vampires, but it's werewolves, and beyond the werewolves, it's other entities. And so when you get this overwhelming science fiction mantra and science fiction projection, they are programming you for this. And this is what Pastor David Langford said. God bless David, because he said it on your show. Years ago, the Lord said, my people are in bondage. And then, I think it was a year ago, and David, correct me, maybe it was 4 years ago and 2 years ago, he said they're going into captivity. The people who get to live will be taken into slavery. I've had, Dave, Christians tell me this. I'm going into the camps to be a witness for Jesus. Number one, when you go into the camps as a Christian, you're never coming out, outside of miraculous intervention. This is the thing that I've got to make it clear to everybody. I'm not a reactionary. I'm not trying to scare anybody, but the plan is to kill every man, woman, child. Let me make it easy for you. If the head of the world's biggest intelligence agency is a practicing Muslim, if the administration has 250 strong believing Muslims and the fusion centers are run by Muslims, do you think a Christian has a fair chance to be heard? I don't think so. So within the very realm of the land, this is like a bloodlust that cannot be satisfied. The appetites of hell can never be satisfied by the surrender of the fearful. Okay? Maybe there's a new statement. But you've got to defeat it with the blood of the Lamb, the word of our testimony, loving not our lives unto death, and withstand it. I intend to withstand it. And by the grace of God, when that day comes, I'll do what I have to do. But in the meantime, I'm praying. I'm calling God's people to prayer. David Langford is calling them to fasting, and he's the authority in that. And the bottom line is, Doug, we've got people all over the world. But, Dave, another thing I get every day in my email, well, how will Canada fare? Canada will be the staging ground. The same thing that's planned for the Christians in America is planned for the Christians in Canada, and the slaughter is absolutely, how should I say this, detailed to the address on your mailbox. Go ahead.
Bingo. That's exactly right. We have all been targeted. We're all earmarked. This is what the NSA spying programs are about. We've all been identified. The thing that remains to be seen, though, in the big picture is the overall sequencing. And I'd like to throw this out for some discussion. I think the first thing we're going to see go is our command and control, which is the Internet. They've got to destroy the committees of correspondence by taking down the Internet, and we're seeing increased chatter about that. Then we're going to see a false flag event, in my estimation. And my best bet now this is fluid and it can change according to circumstances because the powers that be change their plans. But right now, with that spy ship off the coast of Cuba, and with the Iranian naval vessels that approached America, and all of a sudden that story just dropped off the screen and the mainstream media doesn't touch it, I suspect they're all going to be launching nuclear missiles, detonating them above the mid-continent United States, and initiating an EMP. That's my number one scenario right now, and I could be wrong in this because that it could also change even if I'm right today. And then we'll see it followed by World War III once we're in subjugation. Because once you have the false flag event, you've got the preemptive excuse for martial law. And one of the things, too, and I just want to throw out a little pragmatic advice to people. I've written on this a couple of times in a couple of different ways. But everyone should go to my website and put in the words in the search engine I have in the right-hand margin, Operation Mountain Guardian, and you'll see how I've covered this. They first did this in Denver in 2011. They repeated it at Giant Stadium later that year, and we've seen many similes of this kind of situation. And what they did was, literally without much notice, they shut down Denver International Airport. They took the place where the Denver Broncos play football at Sports Authority Field, and FEMA and DHS ran a simulated, here's a post-disaster event. They then went, and without parent permission, and I don't know if you guys, have any kids in a school system now, but to try to get a kid to even go to a field trip, you got to basically sign away your life and 9 times the forms that are necessary you've got to fill out. Well, what the forces did up there in Denver is they went to elementary schools in the Denver public schools, and they grabbed kids out of class. They took them to the Sports Authority Field and held them. Now, initially, they had hired volunteers in the Denver area to play the role of mock parents. And they would have these parents go scream at security, "You've got my kids, this is unconstitutional, I'm the parent, you can't do this." It was a desensitization training. What they weren't counting on is by about 4 o'clock that afternoon, before the drill ended, the real parents started getting wind of what was going on when their kids weren't back and they weren't picked up. And a whole contingency of parents descended on this football stadium. And there was quite the confrontation. Now, interestingly, the mainstream media totally ignored it. I think the only place I saw any hint of this was with Aaron Dykes when he reported on this. But the point being this, what schools do now is they have what's called these disaster drills. And right now, all they do is go out and put the kids on the buses, talk to them about emergency procedures, and then let them go back to class. But here's what I would tell parents. Train your child that if they see the bus is starting to pull out, do not get on the bus. Run. Run to a predetermined location. Have your cell phone on your body. Turn it off so you don't get in trouble with school authorities while you're there. But then turn the cell phone on, call your parent, and go to that predetermined meeting place. I've done this with my son. And here in Arizona, they had an interesting thing happen last year, and I published this last fall. The Arizona Department of Education, and this eventually I found out came from FEMA, they put out a questionnaire that all school employees were were forced to answer. What kind of skills do you have in the case of an emergency? Well, that seems like common sense, and it would seem prudent that you'd want to know what your skills are. They wanted to know about law enforcement capabilities. Did you have the ability to perform CPR, be a first responder? That's all common sense, and no one would argue with the logic of that. Then they started getting into things like construction and electrical wiring, and it was real clear when you looked at this, they were looking for people that had skills that could build facilities. And I'll tell you what I concluded from this, since this was tied into the Denver disaster drill. Some people are going to be asked to build their own FEMA camps. And your kids are going to be taken from school in these disaster drills, and they're going to be taken to camps or open areas or stadiums where they'll be asked to construct things, or the people who are skilled on the school staff will construct things. And they'll say, "We've got your kid, come and pick them up." And if you're a person of interest to them, if your name is Hagman or Quayle or Hodges, you're not leaving. And your kids aren't leaving. Now, some people may be allowed to leave with their children, but I firmly believe, after I've read the documentation associated with these drills, this is how they're going to draw us in. And every parent right now who has a child in school needs to cover this with their kids. Do not get on buses that are leaving. Run to a predetermined location, because when they take your kids this way, it's on. There's no turning back. There's no, my kid's going to get suspended for unruly behavior for 3 days the next day at school, because there won't be a next day at school. And if you want to see your children again and you don't want to be in the inside of bars, you have to teach your kids not to submit to this. And it's something, honestly, I have to apologize to my listeners and to my readers for. This isn't something that I've hit enough. I need to hit this harder, because the schools, by regulation, are making themselves into government repositories where they are going to detain and hand over children.
Dave, a question here from me. What's the timeline? I mean, we see the drills. We see the run up to this. Obviously, we're in the preparatory phase, but at what point do you see that really taking place in the timeline? Because you asked a question going into that about the timeline. What's the or Steve? Maybe you can even address this. Do things have to happen? A number of things have to happen before this actually, becomes like a hot operation.
I think there's more than one way.
It goes along concurrent. Yeah, go ahead, Dave, and I'll
okay.
talk after you do. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Steve, but I wrote an article today called 5 Weeks to World War III, and it wasn't hyperbole, and I'm not making an empty prediction, because predicting dates is a fool's errand, and I said that right in the article. But right now, we see in June and July, and this is the answer to your question, Doug, NATO has planned massive military exercise inside Ukraine, Moldova, and also in Bulgaria, and they're threatening to do more. Now, Putin has a 5-week window, in my estimation, before NATO has enough boots on the ground to resist any kind of takeover of Ukraine or possibly even Eastern Europe. If you're Putin and your real intention is to militarily conquer Ukraine, you've got about a 5-week window to act. Now, this is not the only possible scenario, and I want to make this clear. Right now, we're in a 5-week window where Putin has to make a decision. If he's going to take Ukraine by force, he needs to take it now before NATO is too strong to resist. And that is a real danger time. Now, if Putin lets this time frame pass, then we'll probably evolve into, as I wrote today, another prolonged Cold War, but there will be other hot spots with the same kind of time frame windows. So, Doug, I don't think we can really look at a time and say, okay, well, by next Tuesday or by next November, we know that this is going to happen. I don't think we can say that with any certainty, but we will have windows of danger, and we're in the midst of one right now. We could be in World War III before the 1st of June. But then again, Putin may back down. Right now, Putin is the most powerful man on the planet because he holds all the cards as to what's going to happen next.
All right, Steve?
I agree. Hey, Doug, I agree with that, and I will add something. Most people think in this realm of linear. Thank God that in my case I don't. The point is that, and thank God David does, because he can develop the thoughts and present them more orderly. But what I do is I take all of the events, and this is where I differ, and that's where our gifts are different. But the point that Putin will move is he will move, and I commend his wisdom. I commend him, and I say that again, not in praising, but here's what he will do. The West has already abdicated. We've given over. You really think if you're planning an invasion in the Ukraine and all the countries that Dave just pretty much ran over, Moldova, I mean, we know that we've moved forces into Poland. Poland remembers what it's like to be taken over by the Soviets, and our tanks are coming home. Do you think they can't see through the empty rhetoric? Here's what I think is going to happen. Concurrent with the financial meltdown and financial upheaval, he will wait. I would, and I only know this. I'm no Russian general. I'm no KGB guy, but I would wait to maximize the chaos in the West, and financially or an EMP would do that. If the communication goes down, EMP strike, whatever, and obviously North Korea is readying a new launch, and by the way, Moscow just forgave 90% of their debt, $10 billion. So the point is that I see everybody working in conjunction against us. I don't think it'll be 1, 2, 3, as on a ruler. I think it will be, imagine a baseball, or let's imagine a basketball with 12 different rods going in, equally 30 degrees apart or whatever, and they all go in to create the fission response at the same time. Saying that, I want to talk about the kids. Dave, I remember talking about that probably 10 years ago. Here's what I was told by a retired Border Patrol, I guess you'd call him the head of it, over the southwestern United States. He said, Steve, they know, they being the gangs and the people that they were worried about, they know when our kids go to school, they know where our wives work, they have complete intelligence dossiers on everybody's habit. We have been told that they'll grab our kids and will do as they tell us to do, or we'll never see our kids and families again. What Dave just spelled out for you, ladies and gentlemen, is absolutely the truth. And when I say the truth, I've talked to those people, and what they're going to use, the children are going to use them as leverage. And the thing is that they will make the police in this country. So, ladies and gentlemen, Doug, I don't know if you remember hearing me 10 years ago when you and I first started the HQ Intel Alert. Maybe it's longer than that now. Forgive me, I'm probably off a couple of years. But the point is that we were talking about the plan then to blackmail the parents, especially law enforcement, into carrying out unjust and unlawful orders against the citizens based on the fact they'd never see their family or kids again. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That was part of the asymmetrical plan of warfare. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. So what Dave is saying to you, ladies and gentlemen, God bless you for saying that, Dave, is this is why your children are your most precious commodity. I literally did a show one time, and I said that, and a lady said, well, what am I supposed to do? Give up my job? I can't watch my kid all the time. I said, ma'am, well, I won't say what I said. Those were when I was not as kind and gentle, but I said, I don't think you get the severity of what will happen to your child. I said it in a non-nice way. I don't mean to, sound harsh, but when I hear that, like I tell people, well, I can't go get my kid out of that situation. I'll lose my job. Dave just told you, guess what? You're not going to get a tardy slip. There's not going to be school as you know it anymore. You're not going to have a job. Which brings me to the subject that we've got to address tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, there was a song, and I don't know who did it. What was it, Bad Boys, What You Gonna Do When They Come For You? Everybody's heard it. It was on a police show on TV, but I think it was done by a rap group, and I don't listen to rap, but the song is real easy. Bad boy, what you gonna do when they come for you? Well, I think people better come to the conclusion that I, as a parent, in a heartbeat, would lay down my life for my kids, okay? I, in a heartbeat, would do anything to protect my family from harm's way. Knowing how high I am on the food chain, I absolutely have nothing to lose. But I'm going to wait until God tells me what to do, because I know this, nothing that a man can plan, trying with the limited amount of knowledge we have, or even with the majority knowledge, nothing can deliver us except the Lord. Now, I'm not talking about fighting skills when you have to shoot, when you have to do what you got to do, when you have to use tactical. And Dave, I think that's very wise of you to do that. I encourage you to do it. And I can tell you this, ladies and gentlemen, what you saw at the Bundy Ranch, though, was America getting a backbone. The Oklahoma militia, correct me if I'm wrong, Doug, they just issued a statement to the feds saying, you try that with taking the land away from Obama, and they're not going to be reserved. Let me share this. I don't know when the day comes, but there comes a day when that Navy SEAL just had his best friend, who is one of SEAL Team 7, 8, or whatever they're up to now, murdered, and he knows who did it. That day comes when the Rangers figure out that the guy they were in the battlefield with just got off because a black SUV was seen driving away. There comes a time when the people that can make a difference are going to say, we have nothing to lose. That's the scariest thought, because what you're going to find, ladies and gentlemen, is people with genuine fighting skills. The picture that I saw that actually was the most amazing out of the whole Bundy thing was when the what do you call it, BLM, and by the way, those guys weren't BLM. It's now come out they were federal agents, not BLM, but they were FBI and other agencies. But there was a sniper covering their snipers. I thought, that guy's military. He knows what he's doing. look, the only way to disarm this thing, first and foremost, is with information. But then the people have got to stand up. And, Doug, this is what I really get people mad at me for. You go and read the book of Revelation, and God says, guess who goes into the lake of fire with the whoremongers and everybody else? The fearful and the cowards. If I had to say in my life on talk radio, I'm dealing with one right now, Doug. I sent you my response to him. The deal is that if I had to say the majority of the men, and maybe it's changing, Dave, I don't know if you can say different, but I can only say with 400 emails and clearing 93,000, and I can get an affidavit of that's not a made-up number, emails in the last year and a half, I would say this, that like I said, I have met jellyfish, I have met starfish, I have met the blob, I have met a lot of people, but let's just say this, at one point last year, those type men emailed me, at least 70% were those type men, and 30%. I tried to get the veterans, and I failed. I have failed. Look, I know, and I know that I've done the best I can, okay? But I have serious issues in asking God to forgive me. I mean, I know He forgives me, but I failed to get the veterans to realize they were going to be assassinated, they were going to be denied medical service, and I stand by that. I failed, because basically what I heard, and even in some of the towns close to here, is the VFW boys are saying it would never come to that. I'm not making fun of the VFW. But what I'm saying now, after all the SEALs have been murdered, after all of the Andrew Breitbart murdered, Clancy murdered, Doug, you and I did the dead scientist stuff together over a period of years. Now we got to do dead bankers, another one, and his wife murdered. Ladies and gentlemen, murdered. This is a bloody nation. And to the guy that sent you an email saying, why are Dave Hodges and Steve Quayle taking the neocon, and I'm going to deal with this. I was one of the voices that, and Dave, I don't know how long you've been writing, and please forgive me for my ignorance, but I remember when George Bush was pulling this garbage, senior, and I said, this is garbage. Okay, I was a little stronger in my language in those days, but the point is that this is not just the current administration. He's the implementation, or he's the personification of evil, where the other people were just basically transient evil or more camouflaged. It's not a right-left thing. It's not a liberal-conservative thing. This is the powers of darkness versus the powers of redemption. And I would tell people, instead of looking at death as when are they going to come kill me, why don't you start putting in this, when will the resurrection power of the living God be manifest in my life? Because Jesus is a resurrection. And I got to tell you something. I wake up every day thanking the Lord that this is a day that and sometimes I wake up and I say, oh, crap, okay, because of what has gone on in the night. And I know what it means. But the point is, I still know this, that by His mercy, by His grace, by His love, by His intervention, by His power, through His Spirit, by His prompting, by His leading, and through His urging, I have one more day to maybe win one more person to Jesus. I have one more day to maybe warn one more person, don't give your kids away. And Dave, I go one step further than that. I would say this, as things escalate, do not send your kids to school as you see them escalating. My definition of escalation is you hear that war has broken out in the Ukraine. You're hearing of multiple espionage events happening in the United States, an EMP strike any place in the United States. At that time, here's what I'm going to say. At that time, you've got to assume business as usual is over. So you have to have a plan. If you're going to stay where you stay, then read the articles on you need to know how to black out your windows. You need to know you got to make your house look like it's already been ransacked from the outside. I had a guy once who was a plumber at my house. Obviously, in Bozeman, Montana, I had a survival store. And he said to me, and this is a true statement, he said, well, I'm sure glad you're prepared because when it comes down time, I'm going to come to your house. And I said, well, number one, I won't be here. And number two, what makes you think the whole place won't be booby-trapped? Well, lo and behold, I get an email today about and it's on my alerts, ladies and gentlemen, but a lady, and for those of you who are LDS, The bottom line is there are people keeping track of you by your religion, and they don't even want to make the effort or spend the effort. They're coming to take what you've got. That means they'll kill you to take what you've got. Thank God most of the LDS people I know aren't pacifists. They actually know what it's like to have the U.S. government go after them. But what people don't understand is that when you've got the leading Mormon mouthpiece, Glenn Beck, trying to play down what was going on at the Bundys, he knows good and well what the real issues are. He knows good and well the history of his faith. He knows good and well the lateness of the hour. Why is it he would never deal with the FEMA camps? Why is it he would never deal with the red list, the blue list, and green list? If he wants to deal with it, I'll deal with him on the air, because I know the person that paid with their life for that information. Oh, by the way, Dave, you know Doug, Joe, we've heard. Hey, the administration has a hit list. Does that come as a surprise to anybody? Go ahead, Dave.
No, not at all, not in the least. And I've heard that for years. Speaking of coming for your resources, I like to tell this story, and I've told it on my own show a number of times. But I had a former basketball player, a big man, 6'7", about 250, living in Nashville, Tennessee, and he had played for me. Gosh, it's probably been a dozen years ago now. And he knew I had a radio show, and this is probably 6-7 years ago. And he calls me, and this is long after he's done with college. He's married and got a child. He goes, "Coach, what's FEMA?" And I said, what do you mean, what's FEMA? He said, "I just had FEMA here in my house." And I said, well, tell me more about it. He said, well, they pulled up in my yard, and they had their black SUV, and they didn't park in the driveway. They parked on my lawn. And they said they came to the door, and they said, "We want to come in and look at some things. We want to look at your survival preparation, your food, and so forth." And he says, "You're not coming in here." And this is a big man. This is an imposing man. And one guy pulled back his jacket and exposed his gun. He says, "We're coming in one way or another." So he acquiesced and let him in. And when they came into the house, they didn't go for the kitchen. He said, "Sir, the kitchen is over here if you want to see my food." He goes, No, I want to see what's in your pantry. I want to see how long you're prepared to hang out for. Well, after I told that story on the air, and this is not too long after Annie and I started on RBN, I started getting reports, and I probably had a half dozen reports, all in the Southeast, Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, where this was going on, where they were making spot raids to check on people's preparedness. So, Steve, I'm convinced from these stories that what you're saying about they're going to come for your resources, and they know what you got. If you have bought anything from one of these survivalist organizations, and some of them are excellent, but if you've used a credit card, that's a transaction of record, and they know exactly what you've bought and how much you have.
Interesting. Gentlemen, we're up against the top of the hour. You're listening to two fine gentlemen, Mr. Steve Quayle, stevequayle.com, Mr. Dave Hodges, thecommonsenseshow.com. Also, Dave has a radio program every Sunday night, required listening, and, of course, he's a prolific writer. Fantastic man. Both of these gentlemen, fantastic. Steve Quayle, of course. If folks visit Steve Quayle's website daily and check out the alerts section, it's required in order to keep you on top of things. Folks, we're right back after these brief messages. Stay with us. Again, you're listening to the Hagman and Hagman Report on this, the 21st day of April. Ladies and gentlemen, Doug Hagman here for our sponsors, AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com. That's AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com. What you're hearing tonight from these two gentlemen, important information. We are not done yet. As Christians, we're not done yet. We're not going to take a back seat. We are not going to acquiesce or give up or pull the covers over our head. Now, having said that, we need to be prepared. We need to be prepared regardless whether it's a man-made or natural disaster. Our fine friends at American Survival Wholesale have put together a package which you're going to love. It's called the Bounty Fishes and Loaves. It's a special package exclusively from American Survival Wholesale. I love it because of the variety. And here's the deal, folks. If you go to HomelandSecurityUS.com, down in the center, you click on the link that takes you to AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com. You'll see where they've got the fruit bounty, the vegetable bounty, and of course the entree bounty. It's spread out over 580 servings of emergency food, spread out over a well thought out menu. And I've got to say this: it retails for $600+ dollars. This is yours, especially for Hagmann and Hagmann listeners, for $330. You can't beat it. 580 servings of food, plus you get a free telescoping rod reel combination with that as well. Now, until the end of the month, until the end of April, they are also running a special where 25% off of Christian books from their Christian library will be included in your order. And if you purchase 3 or more of these packages, you'll receive a free book with each package, and also it'll be free shipping on 3 or more, a savings of $120 up to $120. Fantastic! It's just a fantastic package. That is the bounty at AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com. Folks, tell them Doug and Joe sent you.
If I were the devil, if I were the devil, if I were the prince of darkness, I'd want to engulf the whole world in darkness, and I'd have 1/3 of its real estate and 4/5 of its population, but I wouldn't be happy until I had seized the ripest apple on the tree, thee. So I'd set about, however necessary, to take over the United States. I'd subvert the churches first. I'd begin with a campaign of whispers. With the wisdom of a serpent, I would whisper to you as I whispered to Eve, do as you please. To the young, I would whisper that the Bible is a myth. I would convince them that man created God instead of the other way around. I would confide that what's bad is good and what's good is square. And the old I would teach to pray after me, Our Father, which art in Washington. And then I'd get organized. I'd educate authors in how to make lurid literature exciting so that anything else would appear dull and uninteresting. I'd threaten TV with dirtier movies and vice versa. I'd peddle narcotics to whom I could. I'd sell alcohol to ladies and gentlemen of distinction. I'd tranquilize the rest with pills. If I were the devil, I'd soon have families at war with themselves, churches at war with themselves, and nations at war with themselves, until each in its turn was consumed. And with promises of higher ratings, I'd have mesmerizing media fanning the flames. If I were the devil, I would encourage schools to refine young intellects, but neglect to discipline emotions, just let those run wild. Until before you knew it, you'd have to have drug-sniffing dogs and metal detectors at every schoolhouse door. Within a decade, I'd have prisons overflowing. I'd have judges promoting pornography. Soon I could evict God from the courthouse, then from the schoolhouse, and then from the houses of Congress. And in his own churches, I would substitute psychology for religion and deify science. I would lure priests and pastors into misusing boys and girls and church money. If I were the devil, I'd make the symbol of Easter an egg and the symbol of Christmas a bottle. If I were the devil, I'd take from those who have and give to those who wanted until I had killed the incentive of the ambitious. And what'll you bet? I couldn't get whole states to promote gambling as the way to get rich. I would caution against extremes in hard work, in patriotism, in moral conduct. I would convince the young that marriage is old-fashioned, that swinging is more fun, that what you see on TV is the way to be. And thus I could undress you in public, and I could lure you into bed with diseases for which there is no cure. In other words, if I were the devil, I'd just keep right on doing what he's doing. Paul Harvey. Good day.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the third and final hour of the Hagman and Hagman Report with our very special guests, Dave Hodges from thecommonsenseshow.com and Steve Quayle from stevequayle.com. It's been a tremendous, jam-packed with information first 2 hours, and we're going to go ahead and jump right into the third hour. Steve, I'm going to hand it over to you.
What Dave and I are talking about is basically the attitude you must adapt. We are a nation under siege. Your family is under attack. Well, we were on the break, Doug and Dave. I sent you both an article about one of the places in California. I believe it's, mock disaster proves major results with students and families. This is the pre-traumatization. This is mind control, okay? Did you both have a chance to glance at that, Temecula, California?
No, I'm not on my computer right now. I'm sitting
on
my
4A. Well, let me just tell you, Dave, and how interesting. What I marvel at is not only the goodness of God, the timing of the Lord, but what we take on subject matters. It's like we get illustrated sermons in the making. Okay, mock disaster drills throughout Temecula Valley. Unified School District High School leaves parents and kids reeling. Okay. And the deal is they've got actors, they've got people watching, fake blood, they've got everybody pretending to be hurt, they've got firemen smashing the windows out of cars. This is, ladies and gentlemen, this is absolutely the preconditioning of the kids at that school to basically go where they're told, to do what they're told to do when they're told to do it. And without you guys, when you got time, look at it. So this is in real life, and this is happening in Temecula, California. That's just one of the places happening all across the country. But when you see it, here's the thing. They want you to think resistance was futile. I have a different statement. Resistance is life. They want you to think that you're toast. You're alive unto God through the power of God. They want you to think that you got to just give up and give in to their whims. Oh, yeah? Unfortunately, if you read about the siege of Stalingrad, you'll find out. And there's an article posted in my website written by, I think, Mr. Hamilton on Veterans Today. I could be wrong on the author's name. I posted 40 stories today, Dave, but it's on my essay of the day. And what he's basically saying is that the administration's plans for us are the same as Pol Pot, and it's called something, The Killing Fields. Did either one of you guys see that story?
Well, yeah, it's written by Roger Brown, and he's a good friend of mine.
Okay, is that the one that was in, and I apologize, Martin must be
picked it up, and I'm waiting for Roger to send that over to me so I can run it on my website. Yeah, Roger is kind of a jack of all trades. He's an expert in a lot of areas. He was on Coast to Coast with John B. Wells on this very topic before John was let go in a very untimely fashion at Coast. And he's talked about death squads. That's what I believe you're referring to.
Yes. Do we lose Steve? Steve, you
No,
there?
he's still on.
All right.
It says he's still on.
No, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Can you hear me now? Am I on, Doug?
Yes, you are, sir.
Okay. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Now it's interesting because the bottom line is that the Harry Reid and crew are calling for drone strikes on Bundy supporters. I don't understand. Here's what I don't understand, Dave, and I really don't. This isn't rhetorical, so I'm going to turn it right over to you or Doug. Where is the disconnect? These people want to kill everyone and anyone who withstands against them. Where is the disconnect, Dave? And then, Doug, I want you to answer that, because they're calling for drone strikes on Bundy supporters, and pretty soon it'll be drone strikes on Christians. What I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen, is raising the bar to be so inclusive. Here's what it does. Everybody other than them dies. Now, Dave, how do you personally
communicate to someone who absolutely does not get that point? And then, Doug, will you take it? Because that's a real question. Sometimes I get at a loss. Maybe I become too whatever, but the point is that blows my mind that they're planning that. They're planning to make our areas of where we live, whether it's Erie, Pennsylvania, where you are at in Arizona, where I'm at in Bozeman, Montana, the killing fields, and guess who they want to kill in them? Us. Go ahead, Dave.
Well, yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying, and it's hard to break through that veil of denial that so many people have. And what we see in this is that people just want to pretend it's not there, and they'll somehow be okay, and they're not going to be okay. And what I like to ask people, and this isn't a foolproof method, but what I like to ask people is, do you think we should take people at their word? And sometimes I refer back to some of the famous depopulation quotes by Prince Philip, Prince Charles, Jacques Cousteau, people from the United Nations, and say, now they said these things. These are documented. Do you think we should believe them? If you were to say something like this, should I take you seriously? Do you think all these people are joking? And no, they're not. And, there's a technology thing that I wanted to mention here, too, with the drone strikes. Have you guys heard of the micro-aerial vehicles that will subdivide into 100,000 small, minuscule micro-aerial vehicles capable of surveillance and attacking?
Yeah.
Have you heard of that?
Yes.
Yeah, I've written about that in the new technologies that are coming out. That's the most frightening thing that I've come across. And these things deploy, and it's like fighting an army of 100,000 people. And they're all electronically controlled, and we know now that with these robots, they can either be controlled remotely, like on a joystick, or they can be programmed to carry out their own mission, and basically they're their own battlefield commanders. This stuff is serious. It's here right now, and one of the reasons I wrote an article recently, I said the ability to resist the New World Order, that window is closing because of this technology. And I think I'm hoping that some people read that article and they realize, my gosh, if we ever get to this level where it's operational and they're in full deployment, we have no chance. So, Steve, that's not a perfect answer to your question on how we wake people up, but that's my feeble attempt at doing so.
Go ahead, Doug.
Well, Steve, to answer your question, I think right now, and especially with the Bundy situation, I think that even some of the zombies are accepting things as being true. They're beginning to wake up and to beginning to sense the scope of the lie. And Alex Jones has it right. This is an info war. It's a war for our minds, our hearts, and our souls. And I think what happened at the Bundy Ranch is important, because look what happened when one man stood up to the federal government and the BLM were deployed. You had this convergence of patriots, and even in the amount that we did, or that showed up there, people are waking up, and they're also looking at the nature of the fight. Now, I think, and this is just my belief, why did the BLM back down? I think because they were going to lose the propaganda war. They were going to lose in the court of public opinion when they back down. Now, I'm sure they're going to regroup and go back. And I'm hearing reports, by the way, of hundreds, 100 to 200 FBI or DHS or federal agents converging on Las Vegas for deployment somewhere at the Bundy Ranch. Unconfirmed, unvetted, I don't know, but I've been hearing multiple reports of this. But having said that, I do think people are waking up, but not everyone is waking up to this. But this normalcy bias that people are so adherent to, that it can't happen here. I mean, I don't understand this. Lindsey Graham, by the way, talking about drone strikes, had said over a year ago that he declared all of America a field of battle. And so what would stop, and I'll throw this question out just as an open-ended question, what would stop the U.S. for using a drone on American soil, a Predator drone, against a domestic terrorist? I mean, seriously, what is there to stop that?
Well, some people think that's what happened to Michael Hastings.
True.
So I can't say that it hasn't happened. And We have killed knowingly 3 American citizens, although not on American soil. But Anwar al-Awlaki's son, Anwar al-Awlaki himself, and I forget the name of the third man who was also from Denver. So, they've shown the propensity to kill Americans, and Eric Holder has come out and said that President Obama has the authority, legal authority, to kill Americans. Well, that's back to Steve's comment about Pol Pot and what Roger Brown wrote about. And it's precisely that kind of thinking, and that's what people need to realize. But what do we do about it? Well, earlier, Steve, when you were talking about Groover and his visions and how the volcanoes in the Northwest all simultaneously went off and halted the advance, you know what that put me in the mind of? Is what happened in the War of 1812 is Dolly Madison runs out of the Capitol with George Washington's portrait in hand, and here come the British down the street. They set fire to the White House. They burned a lot of other government buildings. And then what happened to them? They got hit by a simultaneous attack of a tornado and a hurricane in exactly the same moment, and it wiped out a good number of the British forces and weakened them so much that when they tried to carry their tyranny to Fort McHenry, they didn't have the manpower to overcome the fort. And back to what does all this mean? I believe Providence was on the side of Americans in the War of 1812, and I think in Groover's vision that Steve so aptly described, Providence was on the side of Americans at that time. But there's going to be no Providence for modern-day America if we don't repent and find God.
Absolutely. I want to take everybody to part of Jim Willey's latest Jackass report. Now I understand why he calls it the Golden Jackass. He and some of his colleagues basically shot this question amongst themselves. What is it that keeps people that really should know better not even caring? Or what are the falsehoods they believe? Those are my kind of synoptic statements over it. But here's what he says on point C. By the way, this is posted on my alerts section. This is Jim and his friends. We conclude that some people are so frightened by certain threats that they wish to ignore them in order to avoid a deeply rooted sense of insecurity. They might choose to minimize the threats since horrifying. They stick with illusions in a dream world. To me, this is sticking one's head in the sand while exposing one's hindquarters to the full impact of, full impact of the impact that has become utterly obvious. Listen to this. We conclude that some people are successful in their work and deeply invest in the current system. They do not wish to alter the system in which they succeed, normalcy bias. However, doing so has already resulted in significant loss of business, even for the successful and diligent. To me, this is sticking one's head in the sand while exposing one's hindquarters to the full impact, the impact that has become utterly obvious. Here's what he says. We conclude that people come from different eras within the national history. The older folks with more trust in the system to rebound, like after the Great Depression and World War II. The military veterans were replete with loyalty rooted in trust. The Vietnam boomer generation, absent trust entirely. The youth, mostly disillusioned about the future and struggling for a path to a job. To me, the stratified divisions of society will always be present and always exert hugely different conditioning factors. The jackass passed through the Vietnam era and saw the betrayals to my generation. This is Jim, first person. To me, after a few years of holding firm from a conditioned response, a position of loyalty to the system seems untenable. But listen to this, and somebody will get offended by this, of course, but he says, when you integrate all this, what appears is defense mechanisms for a nation undergoing, boy, this is tremendous. What appears is defense mechanisms for a nation undergoing systematic failure along with delusional defeated masses not coping too well during the collapse. Too many people have succumbed to the pressures and remain hidden in their little anal caves. Now, those are his words. Basically, he's claiming that their heads are too far up. They're giving themselves, what would you say, eyewitness accounts to their colonoscopies, and they should be looking at the world, but it boils down to fear. You guys, here's the thing that I want to share with everybody tonight, because we're in the third hour. The antidote for fear is faith. The antidote for not knowing is knowing. And the nice thing about the Scripture is they make it clear that God wants us to know Him. He wants us to understand His ways. He wants us to think as He thinks and act as He acts. He wants us to know the beauty of the world that He created, but He also wants us to know the war that is against us. And unfortunately, most people think, and I've said this before, Dave, and seriously, I had a guy draw me a cartoonist years ago when I used to have a newsletter, and that's a long time ago. I had a guy draw me a picture, and basically it was a guy up against a wall, 8 or so soldiers getting ready to shoot at him, and he basically is singing a tune, and in this case, his hands weren't tied behind his back. They were in his ears. He thought by putting his finger in his ears and singing a tune that the bullets wouldn't touch him. Now, I personally have observed people running, and I mean this, unless you've ever had someone run and putting their fingers in the ear screaming, I don't want to hear it, I don't want to hear it, I don't want to hear it. I've watched that happen. I don't know, Doug, if you or Joe have, or even you have, Dave, but I literally have had a situation like that happen. I thought, that's interesting. So the thing is that I understand now when Jesus said, having ears they hear not, having eyes they see not, because their hearts are hardened. If you don't have a hearing heart, and you don't like the truth, then you're going to understand the fact that ignorance is bliss. But in that ignorance, that's when everything bad can happen. And by the way, it was your friend Dave that wrote that article, and I didn't question on it. I just was thinking, I got two articles confused. James Roger Brown. Is that who we're talking about?
Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Everybody must read that. You need to read that and take it viral. Because, again, when he lays out what Pol Pot did, and most people don't even remember, but Pol Pot was the most murderous, barbaric individual in our century. And when I say that, maybe not our century, but in the last, let's just say this, the last 30, 40 years. And, you could compare him to Stalin and Mao and stuff. That's not what I'm trying to do. But I'm trying to say, as the singular focus of evil, and his whole organization did only exist to kill everyone, then the bottom line is you can understand why, James Roger Brown wrote this. By the way, when you talk to him, Dave, would you tell him, I think that's one of the most succinct and best articles I have ever read at any time defining the times we live in, and that's a genuine compliment.
I will be happy to. Let me share with you something that happened between Roger, and that's what he goes by, Roger, and myself today, and I shared this with my news director, and I have a feeling they're both listening right now. I attempted to call Roger twice because I wanted to run the article on my website, and I always seek permission, and I got a recording, and I kid you not, and this is when I was driving home, that said, your call has been diverted to the Department of Homeland Security. Now, I'm paraphrasing now, and it said, if you have a message to leave, please do so at the tone, and an agent will call you back. Now, that's a gross paraphrase. I thought, this is weird. I accidentally dialed the wrong number, although Roger's pre-programmed into my phone. So I immediately called back, and I got the exact same message. So I don't know if someone's messing with Roger because he wrote the article, or someone was messing with me, or both of us. But I don't know if have the two of you ever heard of something like that happening? I haven't.
The closest thing, Dave, that I can relate this to, and I got to tell you, I got mocked for even bringing this up, is the fact that I had I was having a conversation with a source, a news source, and when I hung up the phone, I got a ring back, and the ring back said NSA Data Recording Center, Utah. And I thought it was, it just took me by surprise. So, to me, sometimes things like that happen. Perhaps perhaps it's accidental, or perhaps it's to intimidate, or to let you know. I mean, something's going on here, obviously.
Yeah, well, I think there was a clear message there of intimidation. I'm just not sure exactly how it was to be pinpointed. And I would imagine, and I'll be talking to Roger after this broadcast tonight, and we'll put our heads together on that. Roger's a really interesting guy. He's done some real seminal work, and he was one of the first guys around that I knew that exposed what a lot of what Nancy Schaefer talked about with CPS siphoning kids off to sex slavery rings. Roger was right on top of that.
Can Shades of the Franklin cover-up, by the way. Go ahead.
Yep. Can I tell you something? This is what, since you guys brought up the Franklin cover-up, the children in every school are already profiled. They're already picked. And these are sick, and I'm going to use a word that's biblical because it means the spawn of fallen angels and earth women. The word bastard. These are truly demonic entities. What they plan to do with our kids, if any parent understood that, excuse me, it's not just that they plan to take them, it's that they plan to sell them into slavery. The men will go one place, but the young girls and the young boys will go to other, and these are sick, evil, demonic, perverted, how do I say this? The appetite of demons expressed through humans. The idea as a parent or a grandparent to someone doing that to my grandchildren or my children or my wife, the bottom line is it's more than I will put up with, okay? And I would pray that I would be in such a position with the Lord that I would be able to, and if I'm down to my last round, then God isn't off with his lightning bolts, because I asked the Lord, I said, Lord, all I want to do, you said, Lord, that God, it's better for a millstone to be cast around a person's neck, tied around, and then thrown into the deepest, sea than to basically cause these little ones to stumble. And I said, Lord, somebody has to rise up and bring these children to a place of safety. And I'm sorry, but I'm watching what I say. The fact that this doesn't make people crazy, the fact that drone strikes don't make people crazy, the fact that all of our tax dollars are going to waste us, can I say something? I think we are a nation of tin men from the Wizard of Oz. Seriously, and the lion. I guess we exemplify the three of Oz, because the Tin Man didn't have a heart. Isn't that what he wanted? And I maintain, I said, God, I don't understand. And believe me, I know a lot of stuff, but there are things I feel so helpless to understand. And this is the biggest point, Doug, and this is the biggest point, Dave, that parents listening to us and people who are listening to us do not understand what is going to come down and what's going to happen to their kids. The bottom line is, Dave, you said it, and I want to build on it. It's not business as usual. It's no longer business when that day comes. And the thing is that many people don't have the means. And I want to share something. I pray for those people. It's funny, I pray when the Lord leads me, and I don't have any leading to pray tonight, Doug. I feel the Lord is saying, Steve, you give it, and you give it, and you give it. One of my intercessors just sent us an email, and she said, Steve, and she's an intercessor, and she's praying, and Manette was praying this morning, and Romy's praying, but this lady just sent me an email, and she said, I feel so many lives, and I'm paraphrasing, are hanging in the balance tonight. It's not about whether you live or die. It's eternity, too. But what about your children? Dave, the thing that probably upsets me more than anything is when I tell parents this, and I have parents that have said this to me. They said, I know what's coming down. I just don't deal with it, and my kids will have to deal with it. I said, so you mean you just threw your kids to a bunch of hungry, bloody lions, and you don't give a darn? And you're basically saying just as long as you're out of here, you could care less? I said, and I think I said something like one time, I said, you don't deserve to be a father. And I stand by that statement. Or a mother, I know mothers, and I personally know of someone very close that her mother started whoring her out to drunk men in northern Montana when she was 11 years old in the back of her car. We got the privilege to pray for that young lady, and when Mary Juarez was alive, be able to cast the demons out of her, but unfortunately, because she wouldn't stay with Jesus, it became worse for her after that. I only say this to say, by the grace of God tonight, the only thing I would say in prayer, I pray that every parent and every grandparent will be absolutely challenged by the Lord through the power of the Holy Spirit to consider what we're saying. I just put the article up on my website about Temecula, California. The point is that, Dave,
you right, and this is not again flattery, this is your calling, this is your anointing, and thank God for you. I don't know anybody who's nailed it clearer. I don't know anybody who's given more evidence. I don't know anybody who has built the case from start to finish better than you. I don't know anybody in that which God has called you to, and that's because God has called you to that. Doug and Joe, out of all, and I mean seriously, and then I'll turn it right back to you, Dave. And Doug and Joe, you've got a format in your show that you started on Blog Talk, and now it goes worldwide because people want the truth. They've been lied too long, and I believe God is going to break the hold of the liar over the people who are called by His name worldwide. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, and I want to echo what you just said, and also share that same praise that you just given to Doug and Joe to yourself. I told Annie many times that your website is something to aspire to, because if you just start with the top article and work your way down, you get a real panorama of what's going on in the world and the depth of the depravity that we're fighting against. But you're right about the children, and let me bring this back into the practical realm. I wrote a couple of articles last spring, or last fall, I should say, and I do enjoy football and basketball, and I grew up playing those sports, and I still enjoy the Denver Broncos to some degree. I'm not a rabid fan, but we were going to take a vacation on Veterans Day weekend and go out to San Diego like my wife and I have done before, and take my son and go to the Broncos and Chargers game. And then I became aware of the new NFL security protocols. And Steve, this ties into what you were just saying about separating the kids. At many of the NFL stadiums now, not all of them, but in particular Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas City, when they have people going into the stadiums, they're submitting all of them to TSA kind of checks and funneling and the wanting and all that stuff. But even more disturbing, and I have published pictures of this, they're sending men through one gate and women and children through another. It's a conditioning process to what's going to happen in FEMA camps. And that's maybe I should probably bring that article up and put it back up on my front page, because I have those pictures there at Arrowhead Stadium. There's no question what they're doing. And what really concerns me is how the parents just put up with it. When I discovered this, we canceled our vacation. I said, as much as I like football and sports and the competition, I said, I'm boycotting the NFL, and I wrote an article that said we need to boycott the NFL for their hedonistic ways and their support of these DHS policies. So, folks, you need to hear this and hear this clearly. Steve speaks the truth here. He said that when they come to get you, they will separate your families, men to one place, women to another, for unimaginable horrors. But that's only the beginning of what they have in mind. They're not taking kids just to keep them in the camps. They're taking their kids for their own pleasure, their own satanic and sadistic enjoyment, and then we're done with them. They'll throw them away like a piece of garbage on the road.
Absolutely true. There's no way I can say it better than that. The bottom line is that is it. And that's not what God wants. If I were a parent, I mean, I'm a parent, and my parent, but if I were a parent of young kids in school, I would be doing everything in my power to get them into a private school, and people can't afford that, or working out a deal with other working parents to get a tutor to tutor them, but never give up control. And Dave, I forgot you wrote that article. If you'll put that up, I'll put it up as one of my top stories tomorrow, because that's critical. You see, the conditioning, that's, ladies and gentlemen, you're Pavlovian dogs to these people. They absolutely, and this is the thing that drives me beyond bonkers. I've got daughters, I've got sons, and I've got grandchildren. The grandchildren are too young to. You listen to Brother Steve, by the way. I make my grandkids call me Brother Steve. I'm just, it has a better ring to it, than Papa or Grandpa. The point is that I'm just to the place where I have to be so blunt that I don't want to make one of my daughters cry. One of my daughters gets it, the other one doesn't. But I can't help it. So wipe away the tears. This is really going on. And so the point that I'm trying to make, Dave, that you've made so succinctly is that I held I don't know, maybe 20 years. I want to make something clear. For those of you that want to go on my website, stevequayle.com, please go and read the prophetic words that the Lord has given to me. The Bible says that the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. I am not a prophet. I believe God's called me to be a watchman. That's the function. And he gave me a Joseph's ministry, preparing the people for the end times, okay? And literally with food. Well, the point being is no one could know 20-some years ago the things I wrote about unless God gave them to me to write about, okay? So the idea of a vessel, Dave is a vessel. God's got an infinite plan for Dave Hodges. Doug, you and Joe are vessels. God's got his unique plan. We never have to compare ourselves to anybody. We always compare ourselves to Jesus because that's what our prayer is. Lord, help me here, help me there. But what the hardest point I ever had, I don't know, Doug, I think it was on your show. Do you remember the show I did where I said I haven't spoken this stuff in, 20, 30 years because I was never freed to? Do you remember when I talked about the rape camps and everything that was coming on? Was that on your show?
It was, and it was one of the most riveting accounts, Steve. And you had me worried when you said I never spoke about it before. Yeah, this was, I'm not sure when it was, but yeah.
And look, this is going to sound horrible, but I saw, and I don't even remember everything because I did block it out of my mind, and believe me, people say to me all the time, Dave, and Doug and Joe, you've heard me say this, well, tell us the things that you really know. And my answer is always the same. Until you do something with the stuff I've already told you, you can't handle anything more because you haven't handled faithfully that which you've already been given, okay? In other words, it's kind of like Jesus saying, and somebody says, well, isn't that elitist? I said, no. I said, if my heart can't handle it, and I've lived with it for 4 decades, some of the stuff was actually 43 years I held it. The point is that was the hardest show I've ever done in my life because I kept pleading with God, and I really did wrestle with the Lord, and I said, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. Well, you can finally understand that I will do this. If it's what you want me to do and I can honor you, I will do it. I think that show touched a lot of lives. The cannibalism I saw, nobody dealt with cannibalism 40 years ago. I can guarantee it. Nobody dealt with the stuff that was because it was God's warning ahead of time to people what's going to happen. Now, what do we see, Dave? We see Christians being slaughtered, their body parts hung in meat markets, their little girls again with their heart ripped out. Someone says, "Why do you keep talking about that? I don't want to pollute my mind." Because it's really happening, and just as it's happening there, the same people funding it there are planning it here. I don't know how to make it any clearer, and I've got to get that across tonight. God help me to communicate. The same things happening there are coming here. The Ebola strain that's broken out. Let me just talk to you right now about that. A quick 1-minute version. The Ebola strain that is broken out is a genetically altered, mutagenic virus that is a combination Ebola and X, whatever X's they've mixed with it. I haven't gotten any reports on what the unique characteristics of the strain are. If I knew that, I could tell you which country produced it. I used to live in that world, not as a microbiologist, but as a researcher, and when I wrote the book, Breathe No Evil, it went so far over everybody's heads that until they had the anthrax scare or the Aum Shinrikyo cult release in the Tokyo subway, that's what pretty much launched me into the world of talk radio, those 2 events, because I said they were going to happen in a couple weeks, and it happened. So look, here's what somebody says. I love it when they say, well, why do you always refer to that stuff? Because people didn't get it then, and I'm praying that there's a level of alertness where they'll get it now. And Doug, to the woman that asked the question, I think she asked an amazing question. She said, how could the Russians succeed in taking out our top electronics on our ship? Isn't that what she basically asked?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Okay, and the point is that the reason they could do it, and I think her name was Pam, I won't use her last name, is because they have Tesla weaponry that is advanced beyond ours. Even Vladimir Zhirinovsky, the most boisterous guy in the world, basically said that they have their secret weapons. What happened there, and see, the press missed this whole point.
What happened with the demonstration of the flyover of the MiG Su-24 over our state-of-the-art missile cruiser, rendering all of its fire control and weapons useless, is the Su-24 is an old line fighter, but Russia equips its old line fighters with its state-of-the-art technology, and that's why that ship supposedly berthed in a port in Romania, and 27 officers and servicemen quit on the spot. Because what was happening, and see, that's, Doug, what everyone missed. It's not just the fact that one Aegis ship, it's not just the fact their fire control system. This is the most sophisticated thing in the world. All of their electronic countermeasures and measures were taken out, and Russia did it 12 times. I believe that was, again, an act of mercy by God. Can God use the Russians? Absolutely. He sets up the wickedest of men over the nations. That's obvious. And he also, once he uses a nation to punish a nation that's wicked, he uses wicked nations to punish wicked nations, and God punishes the victor. So they cannot boast in their victory. What that did, Dave, what that did, Doug, and what that did, Joe, is pretty much send a message to the entire U.S. Navy that the majority of your fire control systems are useless, okay? They're useless. You really don't think the sharks smell blood in the water? And not one major news service. I think some of them referred to a flyover and then they dismissed it. That's not the story. The story is, and for Pam, I think that's her name, Pam, God bless you, the reason they could do that is because, yes, their technology is more advanced in ours than that. And I think the name that Vladimir Zhirinovsky used, and I'm going back about 10 years in my memory banks, but was the Ellipton, E-L-I-P-T-O-N, or the Ellipticon. So anyway, that's what happened. And Dave, when you saw that or heard about it, it had to basically confirm to you everything the Lord has been warning you, or actually having you write about and trying to warn people, is the lateness of the hour, did it not?
Well, it did, but it also took me back to the betrayal that Al Gore and Bill Clinton did during the Clinton administration when they gave away top technology and these technology transfers for campaign donations when they were running for re-election. I'm sure you guys recall that. And the depth of that was obscured. We had the technology that the Russians had. We probably still have it at some level, but they've taken it, I would assume, to a new level. My dad worked on this technology with captured German scientists back in the early 60s at Martin Marietta in the mountains outside Littleton, Colorado. And now today this plant's called Lockheed Martin. And he told me that we had stuff that he'd estimate was 100 to 300 years ahead in design capabilities, and they were trying to reverse engineer it to make it operational. And I wrote about this not too long ago, craft that could escape Earth velocity, without the use of booster rockets. This is stuff that my dad said he thought, because the work was highly compartmentalized, but he thought from what he had seen that we had a secret space program based on this technology. And it's my firm belief that when Gore and Clinton got caught selling military technology or giving it to the Chinese in exchange for campaign donations, and then that got covered up in the media after a couple of days, I suspect this is where a lot of this technology transfer took place. And back to the Russian defectors, Steve and Doug and Joe, what we were also told by them is under the guise of mutual disarming that we would exchange technology with the Russians and they would seize upon it and become a superior military force, and I submit that's what's happened. One of the other things I want to say about the FEMA camps, the one thing we have not talked about, and I think people need to know, and of course the word fearmonger is going to come out, but I'm hearing this consistently from my sources, and I have heard so for a year and a half, so I've come to believe it. In the camps, they're going to do transhumanism to their captives until they can throw them away. And I'll just refer people back to Joseph Mengele. We're going to see stuff in these camps that makes Mengele look like a nurse practitioner instead of a doctor. We're looking at what I've been told is guillotines that will sever the head, but the organs aren't traumatized. And so they make for better organ transfer for whatever person they want. This is where they're going to continue more of their experiments on what Jesse Ventura called the humanzes. and they're going to try to create super soldiers in these camps by combining the best of this species with humans and creating a mixed breed race. This is what we're looking at in these FEMA camps. And my sources on this talk about this consistently. This is why so many generals who happen to have this information understand also, too, the threat to our nuclear power plants, our nuclear military facilities being turned over to the Chinese and the Russians. This is why so many of our military are standing up and getting fired for it. They know what's coming. They've read the secret lines behind that FM 39.41, which showed the existence of FEMA camps that will someday be placed under the control of under foreign soldiers. It says it right there in the camp, right there in the literature. And in that, we're going to see humanity's darkest days. The Roman Colosseum and Dr. Mengele and the Nazi death camps notwithstanding. That's what's coming if we don't stand up to this and push it back.
It's going to be, Dave and Doug and Joe, it's going to be the island of Dr. Moreau. That's been made 3 different times, maybe 4 different times, but the whole purpose of the island of Dr. Moreau, keep in mind H.G. Wells was an insider, and I think he wrote that in 1896. But the point that is really important, and Dave, the people that I used to hang out with are the people that your dad worked with, not your dad specifically, but in that thing. And by the way, it's not so much that it's hundreds of years in advance. And I asked one general, and he said, Steve, some of this stuff is 100,000 years in the future because it's 250,000 in the past. Now, what he was referring to is the fallen angel technology. You know, I think people have got the idea, and I better not use any earthly, but I think that they think these fallen angels are Neanderthals. The intelligence they possessed before they chose to rebel against the God of heaven is an intelligence beyond what anybody can imagine, that because simply we don't live in the angelic realm. When they introduced, as Jude said, they kept not their first estate. That means they didn't stay where God created them to stay. They came into our realm and domain and messed with us. But prior to that, and I'll share this, I've said this maybe I don't know how many times, it's irrelevant, but hundreds of times at least, the entire special operations world is looking in the realm of ancient technology. They're looking for 2 things. They're looking for weaponry, and they're looking for ancient DNA. They literally, if I could tell you, there is a DNA bank for some of the most hideous creatures and the most evil people in history that have either died or been cloned, it wouldn't even be accurate. So the island of Dr. Moreau, I have a very dear friend, a mighty man of God, a hero's hero, who literally worked on one of those places in the South Pacific. Interestingly enough, it was in the area of the Solomon Islands where they're having all the big earthquakes right now. And basically you go to it almost looks like a sandbar, but you go down deep into the ocean and deep into the underground laboratories. And the point being is that they have secret islands of Dr. Moreau. Hawk has talked about that extensively. If what you've said tonight, and I've said tonight, and I believe God is going to give a witness to this, we're not trying to scare anybody, but that should basically infuse a determination to seek God, to get close to Him. And hear me what I'm saying, to absolutely know that you know that you know who Jesus Christ is. Know that you know that you know that who kills your body is not the important thing. It's who resurrects you into the image and likeness, and that you spend eternity with the living God, because these people are going to spend eternal damnation separated from the presence of God. And I don't care if your theology is so arcane that you don't believe that hell is eternal, or that when a human being dies, they just cease to exist. That's called the annihilation of the soul. It's not biblical, and I don't care what group embraces it. It's not biblical. Jesus said that in hell, the rich man lifted up his eyes. And the point being is where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth, and their worm dieth not. The thing that Doug wrote, again,
in the box of chocolates with his friend. And, I don't want to say too much, Doug, but the point is that it talks about the worm that's in the unregenerate DNA. It never made sense to me, Doug, until you wrote that. And that thing is what I was basically prompted to write Xenogenesis on, was a revelation of that, plus bringing Genetic Armageddon up to date, because it's no longer future. Nothing that I or Dave are talking about is in the future. We're telling you that by the grace of God and the love of God, willing that none should perish, we're telling you what their plans are, so that by the grace of God and by you turning to Jesus and repenting and getting your hearts right, my heart right, we all have got to do that who name the name of the Lord. By the grace of God, we will not be delivered by the strength of our arm, hear me, or by the cleverness of our arguments or anything. We will be delivered by the power of God or be taken into his presence. But don't listen to those people that tell you the horse manure that you're going into the camp and you get to come home. They're coming to take your stuff away, but they're coming to blow you away. And what they have planned for our children is beyond diabolical and wicked. Go ahead, Dave.
Well, I'd like to just, and I'll try to make this really brief. I know of what you speak, Steve, about the ancient technology. The NSA individual that has gone dark I referenced earlier, he walked me downtown Phoenix, and he said, under this building, this many feet deep, there are 25,000-year-old vehicles that will self-activate when it's time to have one of the final battles. And then he talked about the new federal building, not new anymore, but at the time, and it's nearly empty. And it was built on prime real estate land given away by Phoenix City Council, and it cost millions of dollars of land, and they just handed it over to the feds. And I happen to know the inside dealings on this project because Frances Barwood, who is known to both my news director and myself, she's a former Phoenix City Councilwoman. She was involved in the Phoenix Light sightings and got national headlines for that. She told both my NSA source and I privately that the FBI said they were indeed using this for searching for things, and they're searching for this underground technology. Now, here's where it really gets interesting. In this same time frame, I had a student in one of my psychology classes, and he was a freshman. He approached me one day after class, and he was a Native American young man, and as I learned, he was the son of a Hopi elder, Hopi royalty, and they refer to the star people in their legends. And he did not know that I was having conversations with this NSA person or Frances Barwood about this technology under Phoenix and what the new federal center down there that's 90% empty is actually up to. And he said, in downtown Phoenix, he said, in that area there, he said that they have hidden this technology for thousands and thousands of years, but someday it'll self-activate and it'll be used in the final battle. So what you're saying, Steve, about these repositories of both DNA and weaponry, and we're actively seeking it and seeking, not we, but the powers that be are actively seeking to control it. You're right. When we got to Baghdad in the Gulf War, we didn't go for their political buildings or military targets. We went for their museums because we thought they had ancient technology along the same lines. And it's something that Jim Mars documented very, very well, as did Richard Hoagland. So, Steve, you're right on the money at what you're saying. There is evidence of past high levels of technology here, and I think what the Hopis called the Star People are really the fallen angels. What do you think?
Well, absolutely. And ladies and gentlemen, it's funny, Dave, because Tom Horn and I write in parallel, never checking with each other what we're writing about. It's happened 2 different times. Probably the most mind-opening book I ever did that I wrote because of the research, and I had Mac in, and his wife is a very prominent Hopi, again, there are people who are high up in the different Native Americans that have access to different information. And then I had a friend of mine and his wife. They went down into some of the areas where the petroglyphs were and had some very unique experiences. For the record, whenever you see a spiral on a wall or on the ground, That's a designation, and I don't know how they work, but that's a designation for a Stargate. So the point is, when I wrote my book, True Legends, and that's when you go on my website, the Native American legends and myths have more accuracy than the denials of the PhDs coming out of I got a new word for mainline archaeologists that deny all this stuff, archaeolionomy, okay, where they just do nothing but lie. The point is True Legends is probably the most amazing book. Let me share this, Dave. This is something, Doug, I've got to get on the show tonight. A person wrote to me that's in the hospital administration someplace in the Midwest. They didn't tell me, I didn't ask. But they had a, quote, what they thought was a human come in for a blood test. When they test his blood, this is in the alerts, Dave, it came out to be lizard or reptilian blood. Now, the hospital administrator got really mad and sent out a memo which he included I think it was 4 times the size, basically saying, don't you ever send any trick blood in here. No lizards, no snakes, and ran through no animals. The guy said, he intimated that the control of the blood never left, and they had nobody bringing in lizard blood, nobody exchanging vials. So what that means is that the shapeshifters, and by the way, ladies and gentlemen, if you look up Quetzalcoatl, or some people pronounce it Quetzalcoatl, the great Aztec god, the giant gods of the Mayans, the Incans, and the Aztecs were always pictured as bipedal, giant, serpent-like creatures. Kind of like if you've ever seen the show V. So what's the chance, Dave? You and I are on the radio tonight. It's the 21st of April 2014, and we're talking about all the advanced and ancient civilizations. We're talking about the technology, and yet the very things that the Indians, the Native Americans, talked about were basically so far ahead of their time. They know about the star people. They know about when they would draw on picture rock in the deserts. I'd make this statement. There's a reason why everything in the Grand Canyon had an Egyptian name prior to talk radio picking up on the government bases there in the underground bases. There was even a call for emergency nurses and doctors immediate to be filled for an underground base in the Grand Canyon. Somebody said, well, that's just the Yavasupi Indian. It had nothing to do with them. It's an underground base. So all the stories about the ancient Egyptian artifacts and the Vimana flying machines from the Mahabharata and the Vinayama, the ancient Hindu texts that talk about basically weapons that make nuclear weapons look like Little League. The point is that there's a reason for all this, and the reason is very simple, ladies and gentlemen. The fallen one is coming back to make war on God's creation. That's why the weapons of our warfare are not carnal but mighty through God, but they are weapons. Unfortunately, most Christians, Dave, and I'm saying this, and I think after all this time, most Christians don't want to, number one, admit there's a battle, number two, get involved with it, or number three, believe it will ever come to them. And as Pastor David Langford said on this show a month ago, you don't have to go looking for the trouble. The trouble's coming for you.
10 seconds.
Doug, God bless you. Dave Hodges, God bless you.
God bless you, Steve, and Doug and Joe.
Thank you so very much. We're up against the close of the program. Thank you, gentlemen. Steve Quayle, SteveQuayle.com. Dave Hodges, theCommonSenseShow.com.
God bless you, guys.
Thursday, Steve Quayle and Chris Putnam. Good night.